Chapter 639. August has arrived. This is the first time I'm formally asking for monthly votes in Zongheng. The second volume, Going to Beimeng Alone, will definitely come to a successful conclusion this month. In front of her, no one dared to claim to be from a family of spear arts. Wang Xiu's status in the world of spears was like Li Chuangong's status in the way of the sword. The dozen or so Ruren cavalrymen were confident in their superior horsemanship and the outstanding strength of their warhorses. They raised their spears at the same time, but the distance between the two sides was extremely close. No matter how excellent the bloodlines and training of the warhorses were, they could not charge forward explosively while carrying a heavy armored cavalryman. The two warhorses trotted forward at the same time, taking the lead to charge towards the beautiful woman in green. These dozen or so cavalrymen were competitive cavalrymen who had followed their mountain chieftain for many years on the battlefield. They were extremely proficient in dealing with armored soldiers and people of the Jianghu. Two pitch-black metal spears came down from above. One thrust and the other swept. The left thrust towards Bluebird's forehead, while the right swept towards Bluebird's shoulder. Bluebird was once an assassin who would do anything to achieve her goals. After practicing the spear, her method of killing changed completely. It was in line with Wang Xiu's ferocious and demonic spear arts. Especially when Wang Xiu's instant spear was used by a woman like Bluebird, it was even more pleasing to the eye. The instant spear was thrust out. It was clearly a simple and straight thrust, but the spear's body actually bent in a strange arc. The scarlet spear's outer arc collided with the spear that was aimed at the cavalry's forehead. After the collision, the instant spear used the force of the impact to curve again. The tip of the spear instantly changed direction, causing the sweeping spear to be deflected. Then, the instant spear stabbed straight, piercing through the warhorse's head and piercing the chest of the armored soldier on the horse's back. The spear's body bent in an arc, and the spearhead's momentum collapsed, causing the cavalryman's breastplate to explode. He was sent flying into the air, dead before he even landed on the ground. Wang Xiu's collapse word formula hurt people's flesh and blood, as well as their meridians and qi. The chief assassin of Spiderweb, One Willow, could let the sword's qi take root. This kind of insidious swordsmanship was actually comprehended from Wang Xiu's spear arts. Wang Xiu traveled the world with his spear arts. He never gave in when he met enemies, and he was even more ruthless. In the past 20 years in Beimeng, there were countless martial artists who studied Wang Xiu's spear arts. Wang Xiu was like a flood dragon in the Yellow River. After his death, the younger generation explored the river and searched for treasures. Bluebird had seen Wang Xiu, a martial arts fanatic, practice the spear since she was young. She was close to him, and she had inherited her father's talent. Her understanding of the four-word formula was far from what outsiders like One Willow could imagine. At that time in Bailiang's martial arts world, the Wang family could always see a little girl in the inner courtyard. Regardless of whether it was cold or hot, she would practice the spear step by step and elbow by elbow. Her hands were full of calluses, and she would constantly pull out a wooden pole. The green bird trembled in the midst of the collision and wrapped itself around an iron spear. The tip of the spear in its hand drew a majestic circle, and a knight's entire head was taken off. She kicked the abdomen of a warhorse that brushed past her, and the rider and horse were thrown 3 to 4 feet away. In the midst of the attack, she tiptoed and dodged the stabbing of the two spears. Her palms slid to the middle of instant, and the spear rotated in a big circle. The big circle had the same arc as instant spear, swinging in the air like a horse rope. After the momentum was accumulated to perfection, with instant as the center of the circle, within 20 steps, 3 riders, including their armor and warhorses, were cut off. Some were cut off at the waist, and some were beheaded. Qing Yao continued to charge forward with her back bent. In an instant, she happened to fly beside her hand. She struck out with her spear and stopped 3 inches in front of a knight's face. Before the knight could secretly rejoice that this woman who killed people like scything flax had exhausted her qi, the bystanders only saw his face collapse. It was a horrible sight. Bluebird patted the shaft of her spear lightly, and instant circled behind her, blocking a sharp iron spear that was chopping down like a knife. The arc could kill people, but it could also be used for defense. With her back facing the rider, she knocked on the spear with both arms, and instant spear immediately hit the rider's chest. Bluebird turned around and took a big step back with her right foot. The moment she grasped the rebounded spear, it changed from horizontal to vertical, and stabbed a big hole in the abdomen of the pale-faced rider. Bluebird lifted her spear slightly, and the huge force caused the rider who was still alive to fly into the sky. She pulled out her spear and poked and stirred again and again, and the armored soldier's corpse exploded. Around her, there were only a few riders who could stand. The remaining few riders looked at each other and they were all ready to fight to the death. Bluebird looked at the storm on the other side of the stream from the corner of her eyes. She had to kill them faster. Su Beiji even wanted to die. The scholar who didn't believe in ghosts and gods was now grabbed by the forearms of an otherworldly creature that looked like a red bat and hung on a big tree far away from the danger zone. Previously, when he looked at it from afar, the red-robed nascent soul always showed its face and its forearms were all tucked into its big sleeves. Now, Su Beiji looked at the compassionate face of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva from a close distance and he could clearly feel its forearms. He silently closed his eyes. He once argued with his grandpa about the annotation of the 7 words, "Confucius does not speak of strange forces and gods." Su Beiji had the same opinion as the Confucians of the past. He translated strange forces and gods into strange forces and rebellions. Su Beiji thought that it should not be simply based on the Confucians' criticism of the school of Moism's worship of ghosts and gods. Strange forces and rebellions were not side by side, but separated. Strange was used as a verb, and gods referred to the mind. At this moment, Su Beiji felt that he had made a big mistake. He was chanting scriptures and mantras. Chapter 640. The otherworldly item didn't pay any attention to the scholar who looked like he had fallen into an ice cellar. Its happy face looked into the distance as if it was hesitating whether to help or not. The otherworldly item with the green python armor under the wide sleeves of its vermilion robe threw away the burden in its hand and threw Su Beiji to the ground. Its delicate body, which could be considered exquisite even if one didn't look at its 2 faces and forearms, slowly floated up until it was above the branch at the top. Its wide sleeves swayed, setting off the snow-white and eye-catching bare feet. Su Beiji coincidentally raised her head and saw this scene. She shuddered even more. Could it really be a ghost that had escaped from Fengdu? Yuanying twisted its neck stiffly. In its vision, there were many soldiers who had abandoned their horses and were advancing up the mountain like a swarm of locusts. The otherworldly item rubbed its belly and burped. Ordinary people burped when they were full, but it only burped when it was hungry. On the stream, Raccoon Diwu sneered, "Let's see how long you can hide." The mountain master of Mount Tibbing was truly enraged. He threw the dragon tendon behind him. When he crushed the horse's back, he pulled out his saber. The scabbard with the golden thread attached to it was left near the dead horse. It was stuck in the ground. With this throw, the dragon tendon returned to its scabbard. Raccoon Diwu wasn't famous for its knife skills. Since it had broken Deng Mao's spear with its bare hands, it was clear that something was wrong. After Raccoon Diwu abandoned its knife, it glanced at the undulating stream downstream and sneered. It no longer floated above the stream and dived into the water like Su Fengyan. Su Fengyan finally appeared. His whole body was soaked, and he was holding the spring and autumn sword with sword aura like the wind. The stream quickly retreated from the top of his head to his waist and knees. In the end, only the water stains were left on the soles of his feet. There was no way out and nowhere to hide. The area occupied by Raccoon Diwu became the dividing line. The stream was blocked by the purple-clothed man and couldn't get close to the line. The turbulent and turbid stream stopped behind him and continued to spread to both sides. The stream was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, like a yellow dragon that could devour people at any time. Su Fengyan did something that made Raccoon Diwu feel strange. He put the spring and autumn sword back into its scabbard. The scabbard meant Raccoon Diwu had something to rely on. The sword returned to its scabbard. Was he in a hurry to reincarnate? Raccoon Diwu ran forward in big strides like thunder. With every step the man took, the stream behind him moved 1 step forward. Su Fengnian retracted his palm with his palm facing inwards and pushed out with his palm facing outwards. The 12 flying swords formed a semicircular sword. It was created with the method of tying the black strands, which gave it the rather resounding name of the lightning pool. Raccoon Diwu, on the other hand, defeated 10 people with 1 strength without any fancy moves. When they were 5 steps apart, it twisted its body sideways and punched fiercely. Su Fengnian used his palm to block the fist that could destroy cities and shake mountains. His feet sunk into the mud until it reached his knees. He used the pagoda holding style and stacked it on the back of his palm. Unexpectedly, he did not evade the punch. Raccoon Diwu's anger overflowed. It pressed down again and again. The mud under Su Fengnian's knees splashed out faster than an arrow. The stream behind Raccoon Diwu swayed violently. Su Fengnian's sword formation condensed and did not disperse. It was not to make an unnecessary attack, but to borrow the sword embryo of the 12 flying swords to support the big yellow courtyard. The man and the sword formation were in harmony. Raccoon Diwu kicked out. The expressionless Su Fengnian's right palm slapped down, while his left palm pushed towards Raccoon Diwu's chest. It did not disperse the kick, nor did it touch Raccoon Diwu's purple clothes. Su Fengnian only dissipated some of the force, but it was in vain as he slid backward. His feet and the knife cut a gully at the bottom of the stream. Without waiting for Su Fengnian to stand still and take a breath, Raccoon Diwu's legs swept towards his neck. Su Fengnian tilted his shoulder and blocked with both hands. Just by looking at the extent of the semicircular sword formations trembling, one could tell that this kick was powerful. Su Fengnian's entire body sank into the muddy river wall that was as tall as a person. Raccoon Diwu stepped on Su Fengnian's chest and pushed his back a few feet into the muddy wall. He leisurely shook his head and teased, "Fortunately, you have 12 flying swords that are not inferior to the Wu family's sword tomb. If you don't take people's heads, can they still be considered flying swords?" Raccoon Diwu's hands reached into the air and grabbed. Then his 5 fingers formed a hook. A brand new sword formation that was formed by a thunder pool was torn apart by the enormous force. Su Fengnian did not give him the opportunity to destroy the thunder pool. He knocked Raccoon Diwu with his shoulder. Raccoon Diwu pulled on the sword formation with one hand and waved his other arm horizontally. Su Fengnian's chi dynamic that was sent flying to the sides suddenly lost its traction with the sword formation. Raccoon Diwu stomped on the ground and leaped high. He struck with his elbow towards Su Fengnian, who had not yet stabilized his body. A huge pit that was more than 10 feet wide and 10 feet long appeared at the bottom of the river. This was the result of Su Fengnian using Fata Morgana to reduce 80 to 90% of Raccoon Diwu's elbow force. Raccoon Diwu laughed sinisterly. "You dare to challenge me with just this weight?" Raccoon Diwu stood still. He no longer chased after Su Fengnian, who was in a sorry state. He pulled out a mighty stance of a celestial being throwing a cauldron and threw a punch in the air. Su Fengnian's chi dynamic speed climbed to the peak since he started practicing martial arts. Both of his hands drew circles, but he was still unable to completely eliminate the strong wind from this punch. After his body was hit, he bent like a bow. Black blood seeped out from the corner of Su Fengnian's mouth. He said in a muffled voice, "I once whipped a famous horse while drunk." Raccoon Diwu mercilessly unleashed a crushing attack. At the bottom of the river, the purple-clothed swordsman was shining brightly. He continuously attacked and retreated. At the bottom of the river, he had already fought for a distance of 1 li. Raccoon Diwu did not even hear Su Fengnian's next sentence clearly. "I once threw away 1,000 gold coins when I was young." Raccoon Diwu seized an opportunity to grab Su Fengnian's legs and threw him into the river behind him. Su Fengnian's body cut through the turbulent river water. He cut through more than half a li in one breath. Su Fengnian knelt on one knee and flicked the spring and autumn sword scabbard on his back. "I once changed spring and autumn for spring thunder." The spring and autumn sword flew out together with the scabbard and pierced towards a traveling bag. Su Fengnian unsheathed the spring thunder in his hand. After Su Fengnian stood up straight, he bent his knees slightly and put 2 fingers on his right hand together. The tip of the spring thunder in his left hand pointed directly at Raccoon Diwu. "I, Tseng Shidi kill Xianfinger." Chapter 641. the blade in his left hand. The stream flowed down on both sides. The fifth raccoon was like a mainstay. It squinted its eyes at the young swordsman who was accumulating power. According to the mountain master's style of doing things 20 years ago, he should have broken the momentum early and killed him in one fell swoop. However, when the fifth raccoon reached the mysterious finger realm, his vision suddenly became clear. It was as if a long scroll had been opened. The content was to prove immortality. The first part of the scroll asked for immortality. The tail of the scroll pointed to immortality. After flipping through the scroll for more than 10 years, the fifth raccoon was influenced by the realm. There were subtle changes in its temperament and it became calmer. This did not mean that the fifth raccoon was beginning to be good. Instead, it meant that after reaching the mysterious finger realm, there were traces to follow and laws to rely on. Although the fifth raccoon did not know that Su Fengyan was using its dragon tendon stream / to cultivate the divine will, the fifth raccoon was also waiting for Su Fengyan to help his mysterious finger longevity scroll to check and fill in the gaps. In the eyes of the fifth raccoon, it was a wonderful process of dismembering the divine will and turning it into a move. It was precisely because the one-sleeve green dragon was born from Li Chuangong's two-sleeve green snake was too mysterious that the fifth raccoon was especially patient. Every time it increased its qi, the fifth raccoon would be able to understand it more thoroughly. After that, he would benefit greatly. The fifth raccoon did not kill Bluebird because he wanted the essence of the arc spear. The reason why he kept Su Fengyan alive was because he did not think that an unknown junior would be a threat to him. He slowly lured him and let him use a few trump cards for him to comprehend. Why would the fifth raccoon not do so? The fifth raccoon had comprehended the fishing the moon in a bamboo basket technique that only a fusionren in the finger Xian realm could achieve. Simply put, it was a kind of ability to copy a gourd and draw a ladle. To fish the moon in the water, when the bamboo basket was lifted, the water would ripple and the full moon would shatter. However, the fifth raccoon could piece together a small piece of the moon in his psyche. In the 100 years of Jianghu, there were only a handful of people with this kind of talent who could remember everything at a glance. It was not an exaggeration to say that it happened once in 100 years. Wang Xianxia from the martial emperor city was one of them. So far, no one had heard of a second person. This was also the reason why Wang Xianxia had a hobby of watching masters fight before he became famous. When a layman watched a fight between level 1 masters, besides the excitement, what could he see even if he opened his eyes wide? As for the fifth raccoon's Xian finger, it was the hard work of dripping water to penetrate a stone. Only after reading it 100 times would its meaning be revealed. In addition to its unique talent and various opportunities, only then would it be able to attain Xian finger. The saber momentum was like a flood that filled a lake. Fortunately, there was no one watching the battle. Otherwise, the fifth raccoon's next move would definitely stupefy everyone. The fifth raccoon imitated Su Fengyan and bent his knees slightly. He made a saber gesture and pointed it at Su Fengyan. However, the fifth raccoon quickly dispelled the idea of applying what he had just learned. It was not difficult to make it look similar, but it was unexpectedly difficult to make it resemble the spirit. This made the fifth raccoon somewhat puzzled. What kind of saber technique could make him, who was already at the finger Xian realm, find it difficult to imitate? The fifth raccoon originally thought that a junior who had just entered the Vajra realm would be able to grasp 80% of the spirit easily. It seemed that it had underestimated this brat who cultivated both saber and sword. The moment the fifth raccoon sheathed his saber, the spring thunder saber sleeve green dragon suddenly swept in front of the mountain master of the weapon-raising mountain. It was unclear whether it was a saber technique or a sword intent. The fifth raccoon's eyes was filled with green qi that covered the sky and earth. It had the aura of surging 3,000 miles in one breath. The green dragon's head pounced towards the fifth raccoon. Its body was several hundred feet long. It rolled and charged, bringing with it the muddy yellow stream water. It was just like the green dragon drinking water. Wherever the green dragon went, the stream water would be sucked out of the stream. It either merged with the green dragon's body to make it scales or was swept to the shore. This made the green dragon's sleeve green dragon's situation astonishing. Not to mention the lethality, it was full of spirit. The fifth raccoon was secretly surprised and decided to get rid of this brat. This new talent of the Jianghu might be qualified to compete with him for the 10 precious chairs of the 10 people of the world in the future. Controlling a sword was different from controlling a sword that was as different as heaven and earth. However, a normal swordsman who could control a sword for several feet was considered a master. However, there were exceptions. The Wu family sword tomb had an exaggerated saying of a child controlling a sword to pierce a butterfly. Therefore, to the experienced and knowledgeable fifth raccoon, the Su Fengnian's flying sword to injure people was not considered a shocking technique. However, this green dragon sleeve blade that the fifth raccoon could not copy was a different matter. The fifth raccoon revealed a serious expression for the first time. He extended his palm and blocked the green dragon's head. He only slid back a few feet with his left leg. The green and yellow-green dragon sleeve blade swayed ferociously. The space in front of the fifth raccoon seemed to be swaying in the wind and rain. The fifth raccoon had no choice but to use his left fist to smash the green dragon's head that had condensed its chi. The huge head fell to the bottom of the stream with a loud bang. A deep well was forcefully dug out and the stream water continuously flowed into it. The 3 feet green dragon sword and 3 feet chi. Every time it got closer, it would kill 30 feet. The real killing move was revealed after the fifth raccoon smashed the leaking chi. The spring thunder blade that had been pointed at the fifth raccoon was only 5 feet away. The wide purple robe shook violently. The hair on the fifth raccoon's temples fluttered backwards. His right hand bent 2 fingers and clamped the spring thunder blade's tip. Mysterious finger, mysterious finger. This was the supreme supernatural power of bending one's fingers to knock on longevity. The spring thunder blade in his left hand advanced. Chapter 642. This time, Raccoon Diwu was forced to retreat a few feet. During that time, he tapped the blade more than 100 times. With each tap, the sound of thunder could be heard from somewhere near the two of them. In the blink of an eye, there were 100 claps of thunder. Raccoon Diwu flicked his finger and tapped on the spring thunder every time. He tapped on the longevity and tapped on the gaps in Su Fengnian's qi circulation. As long as there was a trace, Raccoon Diwu would be able to seize the opportunity. Not only would he be unable to discard his blade, but he would also be able to break all of his meridians and shatter all of his acupoints. What made Raccoon Diwu shocked was that the young man in front of him was not only unconventional in the way of the sword, his blade was even more ferocious. The crucial point was that his qi circulation was abundant to an unimaginable degree. Raccoon Diwu, who was a late bloomer, admitted that at the young man's age his qi circulation was not even half complete. With a flick of his finger, Raccoon Diwu was unable to grasp the slightest flaw. This made Raccoon Diwu furious. He glared and shouted. He no longer blocked the spring thunderblade head-on. Su Fengnian, who had his eyes closed all this time, twisted his wrist. The spring thunder spun in his left palm and slashed at Raccoon Diwu's waist. 1 life for 1 life. Su Fengnian dared to do it, but Raccoon Diwu was not willing to do it. Raccoon Diwu's body twisted like a loose coil. However, the punch that had lost most of its sharpness still smashed onto Su Fengnian's head. At the same time, Su Fengnian returned the punch. His body swayed like a bell on Mount Wudong. He did not fall and took the opportunity to step on Raccoon Diwu's chest again. This time, compared to the first time, it was much more ferocious. The purple-clothed mountain master, who had been strolling leisurely, was also kicked to the point that her body became unstable. Su Fengnian, who had his eyes closed, retreated a few steps. He did not suffer any serious injuries. This was all thanks to the golden lotus nurtured by the great yellow courtyard. 108 golden lotuses bloomed at once. 54 golden lotuses withered in an instant. 54 golden lotuses bloomed in an instant. Raccoon Diwu had the mentality of not sitting in the hall. He did not think that he would put himself in danger. Su Fengnian, on the other hand, was truly going all out from the very beginning. The reason why the longevity lotus could bloom again was because Su Fengnian had risked his life to nurture it. Spring lightning was no longer in his hand, but the next move did not require him to hold a sword. Su Fengnian gently pressed his hands down. The spring thunder behind the fifth raccoon floated up. The earth emitted killing intent, winding for 6,000 li. Neither the man nor the spring thunder saber moved, but Raccoon Diwu continued to throw out punches. The scene was absurd. There were some people and some things that were not mentioned, but that did not mean that they had been forgotten. Oftentimes, only things that could be easily spoken of would fade away. Su Fengnian was not the kind of rich and powerful son who was shrewd from the start. He was also not the kind of son of a feudal lord who understood the hardships of others from the start. There was the cultured and refined Qin Jibao, the flattering Chu Lushan, the serious Yuan Zuozong, and so on. Other than these people who surrounded Su Shao in Beiliang Palace, there were many unfathomable faces that made Su Fengnian hide behind Su Shao. Only the two old men who made the cold-hearted Su Fengnian feel grateful from the bottom of his heart had passed away. Old Huang, who lacked front teeth and loved drinking rice wine, did not have the chance to know how Li Chungang was when he was young. Before leaving the city, Old Huang seemed to have already known that he would not be able to return to the martial emperor city. At that time, he talked a lot, including one sentence, "Young master, Old Huang, am not as good as other great swordsmen. I only know 9 sword moves. 6 of them were comprehended before I died. In fact, I'm not afraid of death, but I'm afraid that I won't be able to drink rice wine. Otherwise, I'm thinking that I haven't married in this life, so it's a waste for me to come to this world. At that time, I was always afraid that there would be no one to toast at my grave. This time, it's different. Why do I feel that the sword competition is worth it?" At that time, Su Fengnian mentioned it, saying how unlucky it was. Old Huang grinned, missing his front teeth. Su Fengnian was more afraid of death than anyone else. If he died, would he still need the old Su Shao to visit his grave? Li Chungang broke 1,000 armor with 1 sword move at Guangling River. After that, he escorted Su Fengnian back to Beiliang. On the way, Su Fengnian asked the old man who he had fought the most dangerous battle of his life. At that time, the one-armed old man was sitting in the carriage and scratching his feet. He thought for a while and pointed to his arm. However, he did not say the name of that person. He just smiled and digressed, "Young Master Su, remember this old man's words. When you are about to die, don't think about life and death." These 2 old men who had climbed to the top of Jianghu had gradually been forgotten. It was like every spring festival when the old talismans were replaced by new peaches on the doors of every household. Su Fengnian slowly opened his eyes. Between the Yin realm and the Yang realm, there was a leisurely exchange of qi. He once saw with his own eyes a celestial being leaving his body in a dream at night on the peak of a mountain. He also once stood between a dragon and a python. He once said that he wanted to slay a dragon and a celestial being. Li Chungang said that when he first picked up a sword, he knew that he would become the world's top swordsman. Su Fengnian used 6 years of his life in exchange for a blade. The great python swallowed the sky. The world was silent, and the stream flowed slowly. The 5th raccoon slowly lowered its head. The tip of a blade was an inch out of its chest. Su Fengnian, with black blood flowing out of his 7 orifices, pulled out the spring thunder saber. He turned the tip of the saber and held the 5th raccoon's neck with one hand. One blade, another blade, another blade. Again and again he repeatedly stabbed the 5th raccoon's body. Chapter 643. As expected of a martial artist at the pinnacle of the Finger Xian realm. Other than the near-fatal strike that pierced through the heart, the 5th raccoon's expression did not change at all in the following strikes. He merely looked down indifferently at the young man who seemed to be possessed by the devil. However, the 5th raccoon's Vajra physique was destroyed by the initial strike. The tricky part was that it was similar to a willow branch bursting with murderous intent. The 5th raccoon's boundless inner energy was unable to gather the scattered qi in a short period of time. It was as if the sword Immortal had carved out several ravines and diverted them. Furthermore, the 5th raccoon's later strikes were all meticulous. They were all aimed at the key acupuncture points, like a river flowing in and diverting the flow, digging a few large wells. Although the 5th raccoon did not show any signs of weakness, he knew that he had truly failed miserably this time. The mountain master of Troop Raising Mountain said hoarsely, "How did the last strike come about?" Su Fengnian looked coldly at the Finger Xian realm expert. He did not say anything and only gave him another strike. This strike was not easy to come by. It was unimaginable to outsiders. He borrowed Li Chuangong's 2 sleeves green snake and sword to open the gate of heaven, borrowed Old Huang's 9 swords, borrowed Dong Tai and the devil Luo Yang from the battle outside Dunhuang, borrowed Dragon Tree Monk's lion's roar in the canyon, and even borrowed dragon slaying in his dream on the mountaintop that night. Everything he had seen with his own eyes was integrated into that strike. When the Longhu celestial master Zhao Shituan visited Bailiang Palace for the first time, he had privately told Su Fengnian his fortune. However, he did not say anything outright. He only said that if His Royal Highness did not meet with a calamity, it would not be a problem for him to live for 60 years. Su Fengnian didn't really believe in these prophecies, but for someone who was most familiar with the pros and cons of going against the flow of the Great Yellow Court, Su Fengnian weighed this knife in his mind. He was afraid that he would lose about 6 years of his lifespan, which was originally 60 years. This made Su Fengnian, who never made a losing deal, think about it and give the 5th raccoon another knife. You and I both know very well that you can only leave the Ran mountain range alive if you do not kill me. That's because 800 armored soldiers have already ascended the mountain. Even if you are possessed by a sword immortal, you will not be able to slay the Ran garrison's constant stream of 6,000 cavalry. I'm afraid this is also the reason why you haven't taken my life yet. Su Fengnian grinned and poked another vital acupuncture point on the purple-clothed man. The 5th raccoon, who was being held by the neck, was really powerful. Even in such a situation, he still looked like an expert who was sure to win. This kind of determination was really creepy. Blood dripped from the corner of the 5th raccoon's mouth. With a calm expression, he said, "I can promise you that I will not take revenge today. Once you leave the Ran mountain range, I will send people to hunt you down." The 5th raccoon did not say any of those lofty words about letting bygones be bygones, nor did he boast about keeping his promises. However, it was precisely because of these straightforward words that, in a situation where they were mortal enemies, that it was somewhat convincing. Su Fengnian raised his head and asked, "You don't believe that I'll stab you in the heart again?" The 5th raccoon remained silent as a mocking smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Su Fengnian stopped but did not retract his blade. He said self-deprecatingly, "There's no such thing as an opportunist in this world. I know that you also have the means to avoid death or to trade a life for a life, but you're the mountain master of the army banishing mountain. You have a high position and authority, not to mention the possibility of touching the threshold of Earth Immortal, so don't think about dying together with a small character like me. This isn't a good deal at all. As for me, I'll still stab you without hesitation. You're a magnanimous person, so please forgive me. Otherwise, once you reconnect your Chi-Ji, I won't be a match for you no matter what." The 5th raccoon laughed until he started coughing. However, he still nodded his head, displaying the bearing of an ambitious and ruthless person. Su Fengnian lamented in his heart. Could he not be so infuriating that he could still talk and laugh after suffering such a heavy injury? While lamenting, he gently released his grip and allowed the 5th raccoon to land on the ground. However, the spring thunderblade had already pierced into the purple-clothed man's juk acupuncture point, and he did not plan to pull it out. Only by doing so could Su Fengnian be at ease. If not for the fact that they were in the 5th raccoon's territory, Su Fengnian would have pierced through all the acupuncture points on this fellow's body. The otherworldly nascent soul had returned while rubbing its belly. Its mouth was scarlet red, but it was the blood of the Ruran soldiers. It looked like it had eaten its fill. It carried Su Beiji back from the forest. Blue Bird put away the luggage and carried it on her back. The 3 great Qin steel swords were also returned to their sheaths. Caution is the parent of safety. Su Fengnian put away the 9 flying swords in his sleeves. The 3 Taya Morning Dew golden strands of sword embryo were nailed into the 5th raccoon's 3 major acupuncture points, the Xuanji Dovetail Divine Watchtower. Together with the Spring Thunderblade, they completely suppressed the 5th raccoon's Qi. The mountain lord of the army carrying mountains smiled faintly. He did not resist and allowed this cautious young man to lay out his plan. The more composed the 5th raccoon, whose luxurious purple clothes were in tatters, was, the more cautious Su Fengnian became. Without needing Su Fengnian to say anything, the fifth raccoon waved his hand and signaled the soldiers surrounding them to retreat. The group descended the mountain and walked to the foot of the mountain. The mountain lord of the army carrying mountain's retainers brought over 4 warhorses according to the fifth raccoon's order. After confirming that they had not been tampered with, Su Fengnian and the fifth raccoon rode on the same horse. Then, they asked for 4 more warhorses from the Ruran cavalry. Bluebird and the otherworldly item Su Beiji each rode a warhorse and followed closely behind. The fifth raccoon had no intention of letting the Ruran cavalry tail them. He ordered this cavalry troop that had been attacked by the otherworldly item to stay at the foot of the mountain. He urged his horse to gallop down south. Chapter 644. Diwu Raccoon seemed to be on a leisurely journey as he laughed softly. Wang Xiu got a daughter at an old age and took in Shen Jibao, a closed-door disciple. To be able to get Wang Xiu's daughter to work for you and your endless tricks, even learning Li Chuangong's 2-sleeved green snake so skillfully, I can more or less guess your identity. In Bailiang, it's really hard to find a second person like you. You really are Ren Tu's son, Su Fengnian. Perhaps to express his sincerity, Diwu Raccoon didn't even reach out to wipe the blood off. Liang Meng and Li Yang have been spreading rumors about how you're a rotten person on the inside. It must have been hard to hide all these years, right? To be honest, although you and I are already irreconcilable, if I could have met you earlier, I would have rather married Kay or you. The battle at the bottom of the stream opened my eyes. To me, the loss was a grievance, but it wasn't really a grievance. Su Fengnian's tone was flat. The ride was bumpy and you even had a knife in your body. Even if you're the big shin finger, wouldn't it be better to speak less and suffer less? The burly purple robe said, "This bit of suffering is nothing." I rarely ask the same question twice, but I'm really curious about that last knife of yours. Su Fengnian, who had been paying attention to his surroundings, didn't pay attention to this at all. He frowned and asked, "You didn't even take the eye of a 6-year-old slave? Are you really going to generously let me leave the southern foot of the Ruran mountain?" Diwu Raccoon's face was full of ridicule, his tone colder. "Why would I need to play tricks with you? A loss is a loss." Su Fengnian asked, "Aren't you afraid that once we reach a secluded place, I'll completely end your life?" Diwu Raccoon laughed. "Su Fengnian, oh Su Fengnian, if you really dare, why don't you give it a try?" Su Fengnian laughed along with him. "Forget it. It's said that those who don't know the mysteries don't know the mysteries. A top-notch expert like you has all kinds of strange methods. Earlier, when I was certain to die, I naturally dared to risk my life against you. Now that I have a chance to live, I'm not willing to drag the emperor down from his horse." The fifth raccoon clicked its tongue and said, "The hereditary king of Bailiang, Su Fengnian, how am I going to kill you in the future?" Su Fengnian smiled and asked, "Are you regretting it?" The fifth raccoon looked at the rare green and yellow rice fields in Baimeng on both sides of the road and said softly, "It's more interesting to kill them like that. Don't forget that I'm also the general of Baimeng. From the Ruran Mountains to the Bailiang border, it's practically a flat stretch of land." Suddenly the fifth raccoon said, "I heard that at the end of the Lianggan corridor, close to the Western Highlands, there is a group of 60,000 barbarians with a complicated composition. They have always refused to be educated, they carry their swords and mount their horses. That year they were all banished by the poisonous warrior Li Yishan?" Su Fengnian was puzzled and asked, "What are you trying to say?" The fifth raccoon fell into deep thought. The horses galloped for the whole night without stopping. When the sun rose, they could no longer see the fertile land of the Ruran Mountains. All they could see was desolation. Su Fengnian finally stopped his horse and looked back. The fifth raccoon, who had been resting with his eyes closed, also opened his eyes. Su Fengnian held his spring thunder and dismounted with the fifth raccoon. He asked, "Shall we part here?" The fifth raccoon said indifferently, "Okay, we part here. Let me ask you a question. It's up to you to answer or not. I'll tell you everything I know. After I pull out my dagger, if I go back on my word and come back to kill you, what are the odds of both of us winning? With your skills, Wang Xiu's daughter's arc spear, and the otherworldly item in the red robe, you have a high chance of killing a heavily injured Xianxia who doesn't have a cavalry to protect him. Then what about the 3 foreign dignitaries of the army raising mountain who are secretly following you? You know about them? The 5th raccoon, whose secret was exposed, laughed loudly. Even. This way we can part on good terms. Su Fengnian also laughed. Could it be that they wanted to forget their enmity with a smile? With his back facing Su Fengnian, the 5th raccoon's eyes gradually turned red and purple. However, the circulation of his breath did not change at all. The leader of the army raising mountain, who had never suffered such humiliation in his life, had endured it all the way. How could he not give the future king of Baoyang a parting gift? He wanted to step into the Xianxia realm with one foot and enter the celestial phenomenon realm with the other. Compared to the head of the future king of Baoyang, the legacy of the fake realm was not that unacceptable. The 3 foreign dignitaries who were following him were nothing more than a smokescreen to make everyone look happy on the surface. The 5th raccoon was waiting for the moment when Su Fengnian pulled out his dagger to take a breath. As expected, Su Fengnian slowly pulled out his spring thunder. As soon as the spring thunder left his body, without waiting for Su Fengnian to retrieve the 3 flying swords, the Taya Morning Dew golden strands took the initiative to explode out of his body. The 5th raccoon's hair was disheveled. He stretched out his arms and laughed loudly. He had a kind of invincible conceit. Even if he was at the fake realm of celestial phenomenon, it was more than enough to deal with the 3 of them. Su Fengnian said softly, "Longevity lotus, bloom." In the blink of an eye, the 5th raccoon's purple eyes turned golden. Thunder suddenly roared between heaven and earth. Dark clouds covered the sky. The 5th raccoon's chi was turbulent. He was completely out of control. He could only slowly and stiffly turn his head with difficulty. "Give me another incense stick's time." The leader of the army raising mountain could temporarily transcend mortality and become a fake realm of earth immortal. Su Fengnian smiled sinisterly as he walked forward. The spring thunder blade slashed at the 5th raccoon's neck. He slowly cut off the head. The red-robed otherworldly item had already floated behind the 5th raccoon. It bit the neck of the headless man in purple and frantically absorbed his cultivation. Su Fengnian cut off the head. It was a relief. What's the big deal about the fake realm of celestial phenomenon? I'll shrink my big yellow lotus into a longevity seed and implant it in one of your acupuncture points. I'll decide when the flower will bloom. Isn't this directly sending you to the fake realm of Earth Immortal? Isn't this a great gift? On the Ro-Ran mountain, if you were willing to let your profound finger drop to the Vajra realm instead of forcefully entering heavenly phenomenon, choosing the former between a false realm that has both advantages and disadvantages and a drop-in realm that has no benefits, I'm afraid I would have died on the mountain. So what if you're a mysterious finger expert? You think you can come up with a foolproof plan and not suffer any losses? I've already sacrificed 6 years of my lifespan. Even the big yellow lotus is gone. 5th raccoon, if you don't deserve to die, who should? Su Fengnian muttered to himself. He looked at the head in his hand and then at the floating otherworldly item whose red robe was fluttering in the wind. There was one less mysterious finger expert in the world. There was one more mysterious finger expert. At the same time, Su Fengnian's realm dropped. However, he did not drop from the initial stage of Great Vajra to the second stage. Instead, he fell to the fake mysterious finger realm. Chapter 645. The otherworldly item, which had absorbed Raccoon Diwu's cultivation, suddenly received a great fortune. Its joyful face actually had some spiritual aura. It rolled up its sleeves and its body flew backward. Like a big red bat, the otherworldly item in the red robe flew toward the 3 foreign dignitaries of Troop Raising Mountain who were hiding in the distance. Su Beiji could only hear extremely tragic tearing sounds and howls of grief. Su Beiji witnessed this inexplicable death match with his own eyes. It was as if he had fallen into the clouds. There were too many problems piled up one after another, making it hard for him to breathe. Su Beiji saw that Su Fengnian was on the verge of collapsing. Blue Bird flew behind him. She didn't support him and only stood back to back. Her body slightly leaned forward so that Su Fengnian wouldn't fall to the ground. Su Beiji's heart was filled with sorrow. Where could he find such a pair of master and servant again? With his back against Blue Bird, Su Fengyan stretched out his hand to wipe away the dirty blood that was as dark as thick ink on his face. He didn't try to circulate his qi to treat his injuries in vain. The big yellow courtyard was no longer there. As the primer for immortality was implanted into Raccoon Diwu's body, it was now empty. Just as he was about to say something, the spring thunder saber in his left hand gently fell to the ground. Before Su Fengyan fainted, he still couldn't tell Bluebird to be careful of that otherworldly item. He didn't know how much time had passed. Su Fengyan was half asleep and half awake. In a trance, he only felt that he was in a small pond filled with lotuses. Unfortunately, they were only withered old lotuses. Otherwise, looking at the purple and golden petals on the lotus leaves and the pond full of blooming lotuses, it would definitely be a pleasant sight. Only then did Su Fengyan remember that it was autumn. He only knew that he was in the lotus pond, but he did not know whether he was sitting cross-legged in the water or floating on top of the pond. It was as if his 7 souls and 6 spirits were like a pond of withered lotuses. Su Fengyan stared aimlessly at the pond. During this period, there was heavy rain of soybeans in the early autumn, wind in the late autumn blowing the lotus leaves, and then heavy snow in the winter. The lotus leaves in the pond were all destroyed. Finally, when spring came, Su Fengyan saw a lotus slowly rising from the empty and lonely pond. There was only a small purple lotus. Although it was only a small flower bone and was far from budding, Su Fengyan was sincerely happy. He remembered the joy of hanging a new peach talisman when he was young. When he first entered Bailiang, the Ministry of Revenue and the Imperial Clan Office pushed each other to the side. They were not even willing to spend tens of thousands of taels of silver as a token. Su Xiao used his own money to build a large-scale vassal manor on Qingliang. When the vassal manor was completed, the contents of the Spring Festival couplets were written by Li Yishan and then written by Su Fengyan. The couplets that left the deepest impression on him were the 6 words, Jia, Changchun, Qin, and Yu. Su Fengyan stared blankly at the flower bud that was swaying in the breeze, but it refused to bloom. Su Fengyan waited and waited until he had a splitting headache. When he suddenly opened his eyes, there was no longer a small pond and a lone lotus. All he saw was Bluebird's haggard face. Seeing His Royal Highness waking up, Bluebird's eyes that had lost their moisture regained a trace of life. Su Fengyan found himself lying on a hard plank bed with 2 sheets. Bluebird said softly, "Young master, we have already passed through Jintoad province, but Su Beiji said that we could not go straight south, so we took a detour. Now we are on Yanjia Lake that borders Gusai and Longyi provinces." Su Fengyan asked, "How many days have I slept?" Bluebird said mournfully, 6 days and 6 nights. Su Fengyan let out a long breath. His entire body was sore and aching. It was good that he was still in pain. It was a good sign. Fortunately, he did not immediately become a cripple. Su Fengyan sat up. Bluebird helped him put on his outer robe. Su Fengyan walked out of the cabin and stood in the corridor, holding onto the railing. "I know what you are thinking. Are you blaming yourself for causing me to provoke the 5th raccoon? Actually, there is no need for that. It's like a person who has never had a small illness or disaster. If he really gets sick, he probably won't be able to get through it after just one time. It's not as long as those fellows who often get sick all year round. Besides, before I entered Beimang, I had thought of raising my blade all the way until I could finally use it on a finger-profound realm expert. Killing a devil Xieling whose realm had dropped wasn't satisfying enough." Bluebird did not say anything. Su Fengyan also knew that he was good at being harsh and sarcastic. Comforting others was really lame. He smiled and said, "Let me tell you a piece of good news. I am now at the finger-profound realm." Bluebird's hand, which had been carefully preparing to support Su Fengyan's frail body, trembled. Once one entered the finger-profound realm, it often meant that one would never be able to comprehend the true profound realm for the rest of their lives. One could fish up the moon with a bamboo basket in the finger-profound realm, but the finger-profound realm was like drawing water with a bamboo basket in the finger-profound realm. Chapter 646. Su Fengyan was too lazy to report only the good news and not the bad news. He said honestly, "Logically speaking, I have the great yellow court and the favor of the dragon tree monk. I have already entered the path of the great Vajra. Losing the Great Yellow Court is the same as losing the Great Vajra. It is more accurate to say that rising in level is falling in level. The disadvantage of false level is that it is extremely difficult to go from false level to true level. But we have to be content with what we have. What's wrong with a fake realm? In any case, it's still a fake realm of the profound realm. Even that awe-inspiring Prime Minister Zhao Danping in the capital hasn't reached this realm yet. If the Great Yellow Court is gone, I think it might be possible to rise again. Rank 1 has 4 levels. Buddhism's Vajra invincibility, Taoism's longevity, Confucianism's resonance of heaven and earth, and then there is the land immortal. For normal martial artists, the 4 levels are ascending in order. There are few freaks who can jump out of the level. The people of the 3 religions are much less restrained and do not like to call themselves demigods. Whether it is a rise in level or a fall in level, I have found a path. Even if it is a wrong path, I want to walk it to the end and see what the end is like. Taking 10,000 steps back, Su Xiao is just a second-grade martial artist who can't be put on the stage. Some time ago, I had an argument with Su Beiji, and neither of us was convinced. In fact, in my heart, I also think that what he said is right. One has to rely on strategy to be the Prince of Northern Liang. Since he does not have the ability to go to the 2 palaces and take the heads, there is not much meaning. Su Beiji was standing not far away. He smiled bitterly and said, "To be honest, I think you are right. There is no harm in having more skills." Su Fengyan asked, "Are we going this way?" Su Beiji said in a low voice, "Yinjia Lake Navy. The general is my grandfather's trusted disciple. I was going to Beiliang alone and had to pass through here." Su Fengyan smiled and said, "Yinjia Lake Navy. This is the Beimang Emperor's plan for the south in the future. In the confrontation between the north and south, it has always been about guarding the river, guarding the Huai, and guarding the Jiang River. 2 of them have to do with the navy. Indeed, we should prepare for a rainy day." Su Beiji's eyes lit up when he heard about the 3rd guard. "Unfortunately," Su Fengyan said unhappily, "I don't have the energy to talk to you right now. Besides, the 3rd guard strategy was developed by my second sister. If you have any ideas, go argue with her when you get to Beiliang." Su Beiji smiled and said, "I have long heard that the heir Junju of the Su family has a belly full of military strategy. Her poetry and literature are even more heroic, without any feminine air. I admire you very much." Su Fengyan joked, "Let me give you a reminder. If you really meet my eccentric second sister, don't say such things. Be careful that you don't get killed by her sword." Su Beiji accepted his kind intentions and looked at the lake. He sighed and said, "My grandfather has always believed that the key to Beimang's future is to see whether Dong Zhuo or Hong Jingyan is to become the next to Oba. This time, the sudden death of Raccoon Diwu at your hands has solved Dong Zhuo's urgent problem and eliminated his worries. After the battle at Heluku, Dong Zhuo was bound to have a rift with Raccoon Diwu. Raccoon Diwu once said that as long as he was alive, Dong Zhuo, as his son-in-law, could forget about extending his hands into Mount Tibing and the Ruren Mountains. Now, in order to appease Dong Zhuo, who has lost about 7,000 bodyguards, and in addition to the fact that she has always wanted to nurture a capable youth faction in the south, I reckon that the 26,000-strong cavalry from the Ruren 5 towns will all belong to Dong Zhuo. Dong Zhuo has always lacked heavy cavalry. With the Ruren cavalry, he will be like a tiger that has grown wings." Su Fengyan smiled and said, "Su Beiji, if Dong Zhuo wants to wrestle with Beiliang, I'm afraid it will take a few more years, right?" Su Beiji stared and said, "A man without foresight is bound to have immediate worries." Su Fengyan smiled and nodded, "You're right." Su Beiji felt like he had punched cotton. He felt extremely uncomfortable. He snorted coldly, turned around, and returned to the cabin to continue reading history. Su Fengyan leaned on the railing and saw an old-fashioned golden face staring at him. Su Fengyan extended his hand and knocked on its forehead. He smiled and said, "At least you still have some conscience. You didn't burn the bridge after crossing the river, nor did you add insult to injury." The otherworldly item stuck to the wall of the warship grinned. Such a lively and human-like expression gave Su Fengyan a fright. Su Fengyan asked, Since you didn't leave, it means that I'm still a decent nourishing ingredient. There's still potential to be discovered? Good. By the way, do you really want to go to Baelyang with me? The Yuanying of the otherworldly item, who had reached the peak of the arcane finger realm, nodded stiffly. Su Fengnian smiled and said, I've been scheming against Raccoon Diwu. It's called evil people will be dealt with by evil people. But we're different. We're both straightforward people. Let me tell you something. As long as you escort me back to Baelyang, I'll give you the great Qin dynasty's green python armor. From now on, you can treat Baelyang Palace as your new nest. What do you think? The otherworldly item that had yet to speak seemed to want to use the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva to change its happy appearance. Su Fengnian stopped it and laughed. Don't turn around. It's daytime and it's scary. It's fine as long as I know the answer. The four-armed otherworldly item leisurely slid down the hull of the warship. Its vermilion robe disappeared in the lake. Su Fengnian turned around and leaned on the railing. He saw Bluebird's gloomy face. Obviously, she was jealous of the otherworldly item. Su Fengnian almost wanted to laugh out loud. However, he knew that she was shy, so he didn't expose her. He held back his laughter and asked, Have you collected Raccoon Diwu's head? Bluebird nodded. Su Fengnian stretched his body. This trip to Baymang was a bit miserable. We were chased from time to time, but we also gained a lot. This warship, which was as large as the Spring God Lake's Yellow Dragon warship, slowly sailed to the southern end of Yanjia Lake. 3 days later, at night, a young man with a head full of white hair stood at the bow of the warship. Su Beiji sighed in the distance. Bluebird was sitting in the cabin. There was a Ksana spear lying on the table. The young master had just turned 20, but his hair was already as white as snow. Although Su Fengnian hadn't looked at himself in the bronze mirror, he knew that he had changed. However, for the past 3 days, his expression was normal and his heart was as calm as still water. His black hair had turned white. This should be the aftereffects of losing the Great Yellow Courtyard and killing the fake celestial fifth raccoon. It looked a bit strange, but compared to losing 6 years of his lifespan, it didn't hurt at all. He had even joked with Bluebird that he could always get it back. If he couldn't get it back, he wouldn't have to worry about becoming the king of Baelyang in the future. His hair was already as white as her ancestors, so how could he not be reliable? If he really couldn't do it, it would be easy to use the best dye to blacken his hair. Su Fengnian quietly looked at the moonlit lake. He believed that after stopping the warship, there wouldn't be too many waves. He could turn all the way to the southern part of the Dragon Waste and return to the Baelyang Palace before winter. Su Fengnian said softly, black armor, childhood sweetheart, morning dew, spring water, peach blossoms, moth eyebrows, vermilion bird, yellow tongue, swan yu, gold thread. It was like a general calling out brave soldiers on a general's platform. The 12 sword embryos flew out of his sleeves and hovered in the air. Dong Tai, who was already in the sword celestial realm but was still the most mysterious, would probably be shocked by Su Fengnian's godly speed of sword nurturing. Chapter 647. From the beginning to the end, Su Fengnian did not see the Yanjia Lake Navy commander. After getting off the boat, he sat in a carriage from Jianling Army Town in Longyao Province. Su Fengnian lifted the curtain and saw a strong lieutenant of unknown identity appear at the bow of the boat. Su Beiji, who was in the same carriage as him, looked away along the curtain and said softly, There is a Yanjia Lake cavalry escort us to Luantong City in the north of Maolong. We will take the road openly. Su Fengnian leaned against the wall of the carriage. On his lap was the spring thunder dagger that could only be unsheathed. Bluebird with Cha Na on her back had already put on her armor and blended into the cavalry. Su Beiji said slowly, Maolong has become a new frontier in the confrontation between the north and the south of Liangmang. After Dongzhuo withdrew from the mouth of the gourd, no one was willing to throw their lives away. Only Huang Songpu asked Empress Murong to send an urgent report 800 miles away to lead the troops as reinforcements. Lu Gai and Yang Yuanzhan, the two great generals, were still observing. Huang Songpu's power was no longer the same as before. Nominally, he was the king of the southern courtyard in charge of 400,000 troops in the southern dynasty. Lu Gai and Yang Yuanzhan did not need to raise their heads, And even Dongzhu's 60,000 bodyguards were completely unruly. This time, Huang Songpu completely put down his face and used the precious favors he had accumulated over many years to mobilize 90,000 elite cavalry. It was so difficult to be a great general in the Southern Dynasty. If you did not lead the troops, everyone would be willing to be kind to you and worship you like a bodhisattva. If you really had the military power, they would stab you in the back and hope that you would lose the battle and lose all your capital. This kind of bad habit was brought along by the remnants of the spring and autumn period. In recent years, there has been a saying in the imperial tent that the Southerners cannot be generals. If not for Empress Murong's suppression, and Lu Gui and Yang Yuanzhan did not want the Northerners to interfere with the Southern affairs, they would have sent secret reports. Finally, they did not drag the Southern dynasty down. Otherwise, Huang Songpu would not have had the chance to confront the Bailiang cavalry. Su Fengnian saw a scroll in Su Beiji's hand. He took a look and smiled strangely. Su Beiji also smiled and said tirelessly, "A young Taoist from the Taoist mansion of Taoist of Mount Longhu made up the scripture of transformation of Laozi. Is said Taoist from the Taoist mansion of Taoist master of Taoist mansion in Mount Longhu Mountain." The intention was a trick, but the writing was quite good. Maybe it was Mr. White Lotus, who was given the title by the emperor of the Zhao family, who wrote it himself. Now that the holy monk of the dragon tree has passed away and the monk in white has not said anything, the two Zen temples are in a mess. The group of Taoist Qing Ci in the palace knows how to help each other better than the monks. Plus, the sick tiger Yang Taisui has not shown up for a long time. I think the Beimang's Buddha annihilation is more brutal than your Liang dynasty. Not to mention other things, the fact that there is only one temple left in each province and county is enough to make the famous temples in the same province and county fight among themselves. Su Fengnian said calmly, "Who asked the Buddhist sect not to have the same surname as the emperor of Mount Longhu? Who asked the scholars to flee for their lives during the Spring and Autumn War? Who asked the Liang dynasty to take control of the overall situation and start to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots? Besides, only in this way can the esoteric Buddhism of the Western region see the hope of infiltrating the Central Plains. Only when Prince Zhao Kai crossed the Sword Garret and entered the plateau with the vase can he retreat unscathed and return with meritorious service. In this way, Bailiang's northern front is suppressed by Beimang, and Gu Jiantong's former subordinates are involved in the eastern and southern fronts. Plus, there is the western region, which has been flirting with the imperial court, so we have enemies on all sides. Bailiang has suffered a great loss. Perhaps my master's many foreshadowing will be in vain." Su Beiji did not ask Bailiang about the layout of the retreat. He only smiled and asked, "Is Bailiang a Western Pure Land?" Su Fengnian shook his head softly and said, "This weakness is too big. Su Shao can't openly oppose the imperial court. At most, he will turn a blind eye to the monks who fled into the country. This is already the greatest protection. Besides, a mountain cannot accommodate two tigers. No matter how big the temple in Bailiang is, it can't accommodate two monks chanting scriptures. The Buddhist sect of the western region has completely cut ties with Bailiang. This may be the reason why Zhang Julu pretended to be deaf and mute about the matter of eliminating Buddhism. He did not want to bear the evil reputation, but he wanted to take the benefits. As long as he can make Bailiang uncomfortable, he will do whatever he wants. If you don't ask, I can tell you. The Western region and Shuzhou were originally the two dens of the cunning rabbit that my family worked hard to create. Now, one of them will be missing." Su Beiji frowned and said, "Whether that illegitimate son Zhao Kai can succeed is still uncertain." Su Fengnian still shook his head. "I dealt with him during my second journey and almost died at his hands. He is very cunning. With him in charge of the Western region, he is like a new vassal king. Bailiang will definitely be unhappy." Su Beiji smiled and said playfully, "Bailiang's big yellow sect Jean Lanting. Wasn't it your father who personally promoted him to become an official in the capital? How can he bite back? His death remonstrance may seem trivial, but in my opinion, it is far more ruthless than the old minister's bitter tears. Although he no longer has an official position, he has amazed the people in the imperial court with a single brilliant feat. Everyone in the court praises him, and some people even call him Jin Qingtian. It seems that Zhang Julu also has the intention to cultivate him. The Yan family became a relative of the imperial family, and the Jin family will be next. They will be able to take root in the capital in a few years. You Bailiang people are just a bunch of ingrates, but you all have good endings. Su Fengnian glanced at Su Beiji and sneered. Scholars all want to serve the imperial court. Have you heard of a few old Bailiang soldiers turning around and cursing Su Shao? Su Beiji was speechless. Chapter 648. Su Fengnian bent down and took out a lacquered box from a bag by his feet. It contained a head smeared with lime. Su Beiji silently shifted his butt and hid in a corner, hiding far away. I heard from the old man in the sheepskin fur coat that the divine gate allowed one to become a land immortal. If it was a fake, it would take a long time to climb the divine gate. Fortunately, Old Li did not lie to me. There are only a handful of profound finger experts in the world. There are even fewer profound finger experts like you who have reached the peak. Those who died in such a humiliating manner like you are definitely even rarer. I don't know if I'll ever have the chance to use a strike like that again. I believe that if I were to do it again, I might not be able to use it even if I reached the true profound finger realm. You're really unlucky. Su Shao once said that luck is also a form of strength. It's no wonder that your defeated opponent, Deng Mao, became one of the top 10 while you remained stagnant at the profound finger realm for more than a decade. As he listened to Su Fengnian ramble on with a head, Su Beiji could not take it any longer. With a pale face, he covered his nose and pleaded, "Can you close the box?" Su Fengnian lifted the box and handed it to Su Beiji, scaring Su Beiji so much that he slammed into the wall of the carriage. Su Beiji said angrily, "The dead should be respected. Raccoon Diwu is a long-established senior of the Jianghu. Can you not trample on his head?" The white-haired Su Fengnian put down the box and continued to stare at the head that had died with its eyes wide open as he nagged. Although Mount Bubang has so many Ruran cavalry under its control and is destined to be Bailiang's mortal enemy in the future, the two of us should have minded our own business. I could have taken my maidservant and fled far away while you remained your general and mountain chieftain. Instead, you came to kill me. Who else should I kill if not you? This time, I went to Beimeng to practice my saber. Every drop of divine will that I cultivated with great difficulty has been destroyed by your hands. Why don't you come back to life and let me slash you again? Hey, are you a man? If you are a man, then open your eyes and give me a clear answer. At the side, Su Beiji really couldn't stand this bastard Persimmon's nagging. He said angrily, "Can you stop for a while?" Su Fengnian bent down to pick up the box and extended it in front of Su Beiji. "Come, Su Juzi, say goodbye to the fifth raccoon." Su Beiji turned his head and bumped into the wall of the car. He even had the thought of killing someone. Su Fengnian closed the lid, put it back into the cloth bag, and laughed heartily. Su Beiji said angrily, "Is it fun?" Su Fengnian curled his lips and said, "Not fun." Su Beiji lowered his voice and said angrily, "How are you going to inherit the title of King of Bailiang in the future? How are you going to fight with so many strong opponents?" Su Fengnian lay horizontally in the spacious carriage and crossed his legs. He said softly, "I'll take it one step at a time. What else can I do?" Su Beiji wanted to smash this guy called Persimmon to death with the book in his hand. However, he inadvertently saw his white hair and silently stopped. Su Fengnian sat up and lifted the curtain. He waved at Blue Bird, who was wearing armor and holding a spear. When Blue Bird came closer with mixed feelings, Su Fengnian's face was fierce and angry. If it wasn't for the fact that young master felt that you were beautiful, had a good figure, knew how to manage the household, and had outstanding martial arts skills, I really couldn't find a better girl or a more considerate maid than you. Otherwise, I would have abandoned you and run away in the Ruran Mountains. When you return to Bailiang, work hard to practice the 4-word formula. In the future, when you kill a few finger-profound realm experts, don't forget to say that you're this young master's maid before you kill someone. Remember? Blue Bird nodded lightly and smiled sweetly. The carriage returned to silence. Su Beiji read a few pages of scriptures that slandered Buddha. He couldn't help but raise his head and ask, "Is this how you treat all your servants?" Su Fengnian asked back, "Are you a master?" Su Beiji smiled and said, "I'm just a refugee. Of course I'm not a master. But you are." After Su Fengnian lay down, he looked at the ceiling and said softly, "That's why you'll never understand how Baoyang's 300,000 strong cavalry got to where they are today." No longer paying attention to Su Beiji, Su Fengnian finished humming that vulgar song from Mountain Patrol. Then he started humming a nameless song. What's a hero? Chopping off his head to make a urinal. What's a hero? Does he know a unique skill like the monkey picking peaches? What's a hero? When you're penniless, can you conjure up a big flatbread? Su Bei spoiled the mood, interrupted and asked, "Can I ask you something?" Su Fengnian stopped humming and nodded. Su Beiji asked curiously, "Do you still have the strength of a first pin?" Su Fengnian chuckled. "That's hard to say. As for me, I have a saber manual. Originally, I learned it step by step. After learning a move, I turned the page one by one. A while ago, I accidentally skipped to the last page. It's obviously a saber manual. The last page is called Lingxi, but it talks about the realm of the sword. What a coincidence. I have 12 flying swords on me. As long as they're not at the mysterious finger realm, I can kill one if one comes within 10 feet of me. If 100 come, I can still kill 100. Su Beiji said calmly, "Amazing." Su Fengnian turned his head and asked in puzzlement, "Are you praising me or belittling me?" Su Beiji lowered his head to read the book. When he suddenly looked up, Su Fengnian had picked up the box again and displayed the gray head in front of him. The elegant and mellow Su Beiji couldn't care less about scholarly elegance. He gripped the book tightly and smacked the bastard. Su Fengnian smiled and retreated. He put away the box in the cloth bag. After lying down, he folded his hands and used them as a pillow. "Su Juzi, what do you think of the new nickname I gave you?" Su Beiji rewarded him with one word. "Scram." Su Fengnian turned to the side and rummaged through the cloth bag. Su Beiji quickly sat up straight and nodded seriously. "This nickname is very good." Su Fengnian gave him a thumbs up and praised him. "You know the big picture and know when to advance and when to retreat. You're a first-rate strategist. Su Juzi, in the future, Baoyang will be the face. I have high hopes for you." Chapter 649. Originally, Su Beiji thought that after approaching the Maolong region, he would have to spend a little more effort before he could sneak into the south. However, very quickly, Su Beiji realized that the situation was beyond his expectations. Tens of thousands of refugees began to crazily flow along the two sides of the post house. Among them, there was no lack of luxurious carriages. According to the laws of Beimeng, there were a few post house routes that did not allow soldiers or horses to set foot on. Thus, even though they were fleeing in panic, there were no tyrannical families that dared to set foot on the post house. Fortunately, the flow of people was huge. 2 flat paths had already been created on both sides of the post house. Carriages and horses could pass through without hindrance, only moving slowly. The post house routes of Beimeng were interwoven like a net. The carriage that Su Beiji was in went against the flow. Behind him, there was an endless stream of cavalry that galloped from other post house routes to the south. Su Beiji ordered an Arrow Ridge cavalry officer to inquire about the situation. Only then did he receive an answer that made him even more flabbergasted. Even though Huang Songpu had personally led 90,000 elite cavalry to confront the Baoyang army, a group of Baoyang cavalry still directly slaughtered their way through the hastily set-up defensive line and headed straight for the capital of the south. Looking at their unstoppable sharpness, it seemed like they wanted to treat the 3 great generals as nothing and the 2 provincial decrees as decorations. They wanted to wipe out all the civil and military officials of the south. Historically, it had only been the northern cavalry going south that had this kind of boldness. Since this cavalry army whose numbers had yet to be determined were all white horses and white armor, it was naturally the great snow dragon cavalry without a doubt. Their movement made Huang Songpu's already not that tight defensive line even more loosen. The great king of the southern courtyard, who had always held righteousness in high esteem, speculated that this was the work of Yin Qi, who besieged the city to attack reinforcements during the Battle of Heluku. Together with the great number of military towns behind him, None of them were soft persimmons that could be crushed under their feet. He only transferred out 20,000 light cavalry to chase after them, even strictly ordering them not to take the initiative to attack, placing more of his attention on building the defensive line and keeping a close eye on the remaining Bailiang cavalry. Moreover, for the first time, he used his status as the great king of the southern courtyard, a status that many of the influential figures of the southern dynasty didn't treat too seriously, to give Gu Serong and the other two provinces two sets of military orders that left no room for leeway. The common people of the southern dynasty couldn't care less about whether or not the general's plans were flawless, whether or not they had a card up their sleeves, or whether or not they would completely wipe out the Bailiang barbarians after the battle. They only heard that as long as those barbarians' horse hooves entered the city, they would massacre the entire city until it was empty. They also heard that even sharp weapons like the Bailiang sabers were continuously chopped until creases appeared on the heads of the barbarians. The 10,000 Longxiang army was already this ferocious, so the 10,000 men of tile building and gentleman's pavilion were simply not enough to fill the gaps between the barbarians' teeth, let alone Su Rentu's 30,000 personal troops. If by any chance Su Yenwang personally came to Beimang, would the common people be able to drown Su Rentu to death with their saliva? Who the hell swore to us that as long as the Beimang armored cavalry was willing to go south and fight, they would be able to fill that Ganliang River with the corpses of the Bailiang's 300,000 armored soldiers, piling them up into a gigantic capital like never before? Which son of a bitch dares to deceive us in front of our faces again? I'm going to punch him until he's looking for his teeth on the ground. Su Beiji lifted the curtain and smiled as he introduced to Su Fengnian a group of cavalry troops with exceptionally solemn expressions outside the window. These are the troops from Huangxian town. The general leading them is surnamed Gu and his name is Luo. He's the son-in-law of the Longyao province's provincial magistrate. He's usually very arrogant and doesn't like anyone. It looks like he's really scared of you guys. The expression on his face is similar to that of someone who's ready to die. In the past few years, whenever the Bailiang army was mentioned, they would look askance and pout. Su Fengnian said flatly, "Foolish arrogance." Su Beiji laughed out loud and said, "Are you talking about me?" Su Fengnian frowned and said, "When you're in Bailiang, don't always talk about how your Bailiang is like. Bailiang has always been xenophobic. The military and the officialdom are similar. Let's not talk about the pros and cons of this kind of stubborn habit. In short, you have to take it easy." Su Beiji nodded and said, "I have my own plans." Su Fengnian muttered to himself, "Don't tell me they're really going to fight all the way to the imperial court of the South Dynasty? They must have eaten tens of thousands of pounds of bear's heart and leopard's guts. Who's the one leading the troops? It's not like Yuan Zhuozong's style." Su Beiji hesitated and said slowly, "Don't you find that Bailiang is a bit like the fields at the foot of the Ruren mountain that we saw?" Su Fengnian asked, "There's a shortage of young people and old people?" Su Beiji said slowly, "The king of Bailiang has 6 foster sons. Needless to say, Chen Zhibao can be given the title of king anywhere. With his talent, he can even start his own army. Yuan Zhuozong is worthy of being called a talented general. It's not difficult for him to take charge alone. He can easily destroy a city with tens of thousands of elite troops. However, it's hard to say if he can command the overall situation. Qi Dengwa is just a brute who charges into battle and carries the royal flag of Su. Yi Shizhen is good at scheming. He is called the next young talent Zhao Chongling. In the end, he is still a strategist behind the scenes who needs to rely on others. Yao Jian is a feng shui master who is familiar with unorthodox methods. He has always stood aloof from worldly affairs. As for Chu Lushan, Su Fengnian smiled and said, "Among Su Zhao's 6 adopted sons, if you really want to talk about who can barely stand shoulder to shoulder with Chen Zhibao, it's only him. He is a true all-rounder. As long as it's something he knows, he's proficient in it. My master is not famous because of Zhao Chongling. Chu Qiu, and Chen Zhibao are in similar situations." Su Beiji continued, "Wei Fu, Cheng Dian, Xiong Shou, Ning Mei, these young and strong high-ranking military officers, compared to Chen Zhibao, the gap is very big, much less those who are biased toward you, the heir apparent, are pitifully few. Therefore, other than Chen Zhibao and Chu Lushan, Beiliang cannot find a third outstanding general who can stand up to Dong Zhuo alone. Su Fengnian smiled but did not speak. Su Beiji asked, "Is there someone else hiding?" Su Fengnian laughed and said, "Have you forgotten my second sister?" Su Beiji said doubtfully, "You also know that talking on paper and personally leading troops are two different things." Su Fengnian's expression changed dramatically. He clenched his fists because he knew who was leading the great snow dragon cavalry to Nanjing. Su Beiji immediately guessed the truth. He said bitterly, "If she can return to Beiliang alive, I will be convinced." Su Fengnian exhaled deeply. His brows relaxed. He closed his eyes and leaned against the wall of the carriage. He said with a smile, "Then you can be convinced now. My second sister had memorized all of Beimang's military towns, villages, and post stations before the age of 14. Su Beiji thought carefully in his heart and then shook his head hard. After a long time he asked, "Why?" Su Fengnian rubbed his face and said softly, "When she was young, she made a bet with my eldest sister. Second sister said that she would lead troops to Nanjing before the age of 30. Their bets are a book on the art of war and a box of rouge." Su Beiji snorted coldly, "How can military matters be trifled with?" The rout of the Longxiang army was clearly calculated by a military expert. Using losses to gain momentum can be seen as buying time for you. "What is your second sister?" Su Fengnian teased, "If you have the guts, the next time you see her, ask her yourself." "I don't dare anyway." Su Beiji was stunned. "You even dared to go to Ruoshui and kill the fifth raccoon, but you don't dare to see your second sister?" Su Fengnian sighed. He had a headache. When he was practicing the knife, he didn't talk to her when he saw her. This time, he went in a big circle in Beimeng. Wouldn't she chase after him with a sword? The cavalry went deep into the hinterland like a butcher dismembering an ox. They bypassed many military towns and tore a perfect curve in Beimeng's territory at the fastest speed. Their speed was fast, their strength was great, and their goal was clear. They all exceeded the limits of everyone's imagination in Beimeng. The cavalry at the front didn't wear a helmet. In the young woman's field of vision, the majestic silhouette of Beimeng's largest city already appeared. The eyes of the 9,000 light cavalry behind her were filled with crazed and burning worship. They never knew that war could be fought like this. It was like a big man strolling about in his own home. When he encountered a disobedient child who didn't have the strength to retaliate, he would fiercely smack him with a chestnut. Every time they came into contact, it was just like she said, where and when they would cross swords with many troops. It was because they bypassed all of the tough bones. With the great snow dragon cavalry's military strength, dealing with them was as easy as blowing off dust. Could it be that she was the mistress of Southern Dynasty? Going up north was a piece of cake, but going down south would be a tough battle. However, this daddy has even seen Nanjing Manor city gate, so why would I be scared of you bunch of grandsons? The woman's appearance couldn't be considered a country-toppling beauty, but she was heroic and extraordinary. Her temperament didn't have the slightest bit of charm or delicateness mixed in. After she got off the horse, she fished out a yellowed book from her bosom. She ignited the flames and burned it to ashes. She raised her head towards the sky. Her lips moved slightly, and then she silently mounted her horse. Chapter 650. The heavy snow in Beiliang's winter over the years had always been heavy, unlike in the south. This made the children, who had recently settled down in this barren and desolate land, very happy. The amount of iron ore, war horses, and food in Beiliang was not something they could touch. Among the 4 children, the eldest daughter wasn't particularly outstanding. She was just like any other young girl who liked to use rouge and face powder. It was just that she had a feisty temperament, just like when she swung on the swing. She wasn't as reserved as the other young ladies of noble families, always wishing that she could swing higher than the top floor. The second child was the most intelligent. Since childhood, he had been regarded as a child prodigy. He learned to read very quickly and was introverted. Everyone said that he took after his mother. The third child looked the most like his beautiful mother. He was a typical lucky man from the north and a prime minister from the south. He was destined to be a noble since he was born. Perhaps this family's descendants had used up all their luck on the first 3 children, so the 4th child, who was born and raised in Baoyang, was a little pitiful. Just like the land in his hometown, he had never cried since he came out of his mother's womb. After he could walk, he was simple and naive. He was yellow and skinny, and there were often 2 lines of snot hanging from his nose, mixed with saliva. The servants in the mansion also thought that the mistress died because of him. In private, they liked the first 3 young masters from the bottom of their hearts. Only the 4th child, who was extraordinarily strong, disliked him. Some brave young servants would fiercely bully him when there was no one around. Anyway, the little boy was like copper tendons and iron bones, so he was not afraid of being pinched. Even if he was slapped a few times, it would not be a big deal as long as he was not seen by the housekeepers and gatekeepers. The 12-year-old Su Weisheng's study was spotless and orderly. There were no superfluous decorations, except for the 4 treasures of the study and the vast number of books that included the 100 schools of thought. Every book on the bookshelf was meticulously circled with a red pen. Today, she was writing the character, Yong, meticulously. As the 2nd commandery princess of Baoyang Palace, she was known to be good at everything except calligraphy. This made Su Weisheng, who was always eager to outdo others, go to a dead end and swear to write a satisfactory regular script. It was okay if he couldn't beat his brother, but how could he lose to her? She had long been familiar with the true meaning of calligraphy. She didn't need others to teach her how to write. She knew very well how to write with a straight brush and a side brush to the point of perfection. However, when it came to her to write, it was always twisted like an earthworm. This made Su Weisheng, who had written more than 3,000 characters this autumn, a little annoyed. A handsome boy with red lips and white teeth carried a corpse that was smaller than him into the study. Su Weisheng raised the corner of his eyes slightly and ignored him. The luxuriously dressed child put down the corpse and laughed. "Huang Manor, we're here." The corpse, lying on the ground, immediately stood up after hearing the voice. He grinned foolishly, with 2 snot drooling and a lot of saliva hanging from his nose. This pair of brothers was Su Fengyan and Su Longxiang. Huang Manor liked to be dragged by his brother. He also liked to be thrown into the snow by his brother on a snowy day. His whole head was cold and very comfortable. Su Fengyan reached out and carefully wiped his brother's snot and saliva. Then he wiped it on his cuffs carelessly. He pointed to a wind-weather seismograph with a dragon head facing a toad in the study. He patted Huang Manor's head and said with a smile, "Go and play with the toad. Remember not to break it this time. If 2nd sister chases you away, I won't help you." The yellow child obediently squatted beside the big bottle. This time, he didn't secretly pull up the toad that was squatting on the ground to catch the bronze ball. Su Fengyan lay on the desk and shouted, "2nd sister, you're still practicing calligraphy. What are you practicing for? Let's go fishing by the lake. Big sister has already set up the embroidery stool." Su Weisheng, who was already a young girl, didn't even look at her brother Su Fengyan. Su Fengyan scratched his head and said helplessly, "You really don't want to go?" Su Weisheng said impatiently, "Write another 60 Yong characters. I still want to study." Su Fengyan, who was used to it, said, "Oh," and laughed. He grabbed the brush and spread out a large piece of paper. He scribbled a few dozen Yong characters in one breath before returning the brush to his 2nd sister. "Look, you've already finished writing. Let's go play together." Su Weisheng glared angrily. The little heir of Baoyang Palace whistled and didn't care at all. Su Weisheng put down the brush and said coldly, "Just half an hour." Su Fengyan smiled and said, "Okay." The 3 siblings walked out of the study together. Huang Man was naturally dragged out by his brother. Su Fengyan asked, "2nd sister, when is it going to snow?" Su Weisheng frowned and said, "The frost has just started. It's not even the beginning of winter yet. Besides, it might snow a few days after the light snow this year." Su Fengyan made a face and said, "2nd sister, you're so smart. Why don't you just let the heavens snow earlier?" Su Weisheng reached out and pinched the little heir's ear hard. This year, Baoyang's first snow really did come 3 days after the light snow. The 2 young ladies and the 2 younger brothers were having a snowball fight. Su Fengnian had to persuade his second sister to come out of the study and play with her. Of course, he and his second sister were on one side, while his eldest sister, Su Jihu, and his younger brother, Huang Man, were on the other side. Because the terrifyingly strong Huang Man, had told her brother that he was only allowed to make snowballs and not throw them. In addition, under the command of his second sister, Su Weisheng, Su Fengnian played in a very methodical manner. The isolated and helpless Su Jihu was naturally smashed many times. However, after surrendering, she secretly stuffed a snowball into Su Fengnian's collar and was satisfied. Su Fengnian grimaced and took out a snowball from his clothes as he said to his second sister, "How about we go to Tide Listening Pavilion to enjoy the scenery?" Su Weisheng refused without hesitation, "No, I want to study." Su Jihu helped her brother take out a snowball and said with a smile, "It's enough for a girl to marry a good husband. You've read so many military books. Don't tell me you still want to be a general?" Su Weisheng glanced at this older sister who had been an enemy since they were young. She couldn't be bothered to speak and turned to leave. Su Jihu made a face at her younger sister's back. Su Weisheng seemed to have eyes on the back of her head. She paused and turned her head to say coldly, "How many more years do you think Su Fengnian will be able to play?" Su Jihu furrowed her beautiful brows. She put her hands on her hips and asked, "How do you know?" Su Fengnian sensed that something was amiss and knew that they would be implicated if they stayed any longer. He pulled Huang Man, and hurriedly left the battlefield. Afterwards, he found out that his two sisters had made a bet. That year, the snow in Bailiang was exceptionally heavy. The young heir almost thought that the heavens were an old farmer who raised geese. Otherwise, why would there be so much goose feather snow? Su Fengnian was led by a man in a black robe into the military town of Maolong in a carriage. The taciturn man was the coachman himself. Maolong, who was patrolling the city, saw the man's token and stood still solemnly. The general's token. Bailiang was huge, and there were 300,000 cavalrymen, but there were only 9 tokens in total. The 6 adopted sons of the general each had 1 token. The other 3 tokens were in the hands of someone else. Su Fengnian recognized the general's token and the coachman's identity. He only had one title, ugly. He was one of Su Zhao's men of sacrifice from Earth Branch. In the Battle of the Concubine's Tomb, Yuan Zhuozong was not the only one who survived. This man of sacrifice also survived. The number of people he killed was not much less than White Bear Yuan Zhuozong. Su Fengnian did not reveal his identity as the heir and went to the general's mansion in Maolong. He just chose a secluded inn to stay in. The innkeeper had already fled for his life. However, with Bluebird by his side, Su Fengnian did not have to do anything. Everything was comfortable. Su Fengnian said that he would stay here for a few more days. Ugly naturally had no objection. When this cold-hearted man of sacrifice first saw His Royal Highness, he also had a fleeting moment of absent-mindedness. When he wrote the 4 words in the secret letter, his hand trembled slightly. The heir's hair turned white. After waiting for 3 days, Su Fengnian left the city and went south. The carriage had not yet arrived at Gujuan town. Waves of iron hooves shook the earth. No less than 5,000 white horses rushed over like a line of snow. Su Fengnian walked out of the carriage with a wry smile and met the cavalry behind him. The first horse galloped and then slowed down. The woman rode the horse to a dozen steps away from Su Fengnian and looked down at him coldly. She originally had too many words of reprimand hidden in her mind, to the extent where she even wanted to give him a few horsewhips, and then tie him up and bring him to northern Liang. However, when she saw the exceptionally unfamiliar scene in front of her, the lips of this heroic woman who could enter northern Mang as if there was no one around her trembled, unable to utter a single word. Su Fengnian wanted to say something but stopped. She raised the whip and pointed at Su Fengnian. She said angrily, "Su Fengnian, if you have the ability, die in Beimeng." She turned the horse around and galloped out. After she turned her back to the white-haired man, her vision blurred. She covered her heart with one hand. Su Fengnian stood in the same place. He looked up at the sky and reached out to block the dazzling sunlight. The snow cavalry came in a hurry and left in a hurry. Su Fengnian was about to return to the carriage when a barefoot youth in black clothes fell from the sky with a loud crash, creating a huge crater. Su Beiji, who had walked out of the carriage and stood beside the horse, opened his mouth wide. The black-clothed youth originally had a silly smile on his face, but when he looked at his older brother, he suddenly burst into tears. Then, he let out a roar towards the north. Su Beiji covered his ears but couldn't bear it. The two horses even bled from their 7 orifices and died on the spot. If Su Beiji didn't have the ugly death warrior holding his arm, he wouldn't have ended up any better. Only Su Fengnian, who no longer had De Huangting by his side, did not suffer at all. The youth in black crouched down and carried his older brother, who he thought was seriously injured. He wanted to carry him back home. Su Fengnian patted Huang Manor's head and said with a smile, "I'm fine. You go and stop second sister. Don't let her lead the troops north." Huang Manor shook his head vigorously. The world was big, but it was not as important as him protecting his older brother on his back. Su Fengnian said patiently, "Be good. The 3 of us will go home together." Just as Huang Manor carefully put down Su Fengnian, a horse returned. Chapter 651. Today, in Liang Dynasty's morning court session, the civil and military officials dressed in court attire filed into the city, the sound of jade striking jade still ringing out for a long time. Gentlemen listened to the sound of jade, and their actions were restrained. The specifications of jade ornaments were like rank, also paying particular attention to a step-by-step order, an insurmountable thunder pool. Even though the Liang faction's struggle wasn't out of control under Grand Secretary Zhang's control, the imperial censor was still able to get serious over trivial matters. Jean Lanting's appearance in the morning court session today was especially eye-catching. Half a year ago, he lost his noble Great Yellow Gate, but he always lived in the capital. At first, that mansion that was completely deserted, after he impeached the king of Bailiang, Su Shao, and had his official hat removed, visitors came in an endless stream. This time, he came to the morning court session under imperial decree. Even an idiot knew that the imperial court had hidden him for an entire half a year, giving Su Shao enough face. It was time to give Jean Sabin a higher rank. This wasn't Jean Lanting's current morning court session. While waiting outside the door, he was surrounded by his colleagues' enthusiastic and attentive calls. He also had a set of brand new jade artifacts hanging from his waist. Jade ornaments and jade beads collided, jade pendants and jade teeth colliding, releasing a wave of clear and melodious sounds. As he walked between the halls, the sound was extremely beautiful. Apart from Jean Lanting, who was the most eye-catching figure, there was another person at Great General Gu Jiantong's side who had hurried back to the capital from the northern border, who was similarly eye-catching. It was a new face, but during this half-year in the capital, people's ears had long grown calluses from hearing so much about him. An ordinary Jianghu man surnamed Yuan, a carp that jumped over the dragon's gate, suddenly became half a great general's adopted son. It was rumored that his temperament was stubborn, vicious, and merciless, tormenting the Jianghu sects on the border until they were half dead. Yuan Tingshan followed behind Gu Jiantang, and just so happened to be walking shoulder to shoulder with Jin Sanlang, who was behind Zhang Julu and Grand Secretary Zhang. In comparison, the jade ornament on Yuan Tingshan's waist was very simple, crude and refined, a typical gossamer drawing, combined with the Hanba saber's cutting technique. Jean Lanting was cultured and refined. After being immersed in the capital's officialdom for 2 years and experiencing the bitterness and hypocrisy of the world, after joining the Zhang Dang's tutelage, he didn't have the slightest bit of arrogance. At this moment, seeing Great General Gu Jiantong's adopted son, the future son-in-law who was set in stone, when Yuan Tingshan glanced at him, Jean Lanting immediately returned a smile. Little did he expect that this minor official, who was participating in the morning court session for the first time, would unexpectedly spit and lower his head to spit. Jean Lanting was extremely embarrassed, but his skin was who knows how many inches thicker than when he first entered the capital, so he dismissed it with a laugh. Yuan Tingshan's brazen actions made the hearts of some of the eunuchs in the distance tremble. Fine, it was clear that he was another thorn in the side. Yuan Tingshan quickened his pace and asked Gu Jiantang in a low voice, "Great General, when will I be able to carry a saber to court like you?" Gu Jiantang turned a deaf ear. Zhang Julu shot a glance at this young martial artist, who had been heard of in half of the capital before even seeing his face. He seemed to find it amusing and laughed. Yuan Tingshan still wanted to nag, but Gu Jiantang said coldly, "If you say another word, you'll get lost from the capital." Yuan Tingshan chuckled and said, "I won't say any more, I won't say any more." Jean Lanting cursed silently in his heart. "You brat, you've already said 6 words. However, Great General Gu, who had firmly controlled the Ministry of War for more than a decade, didn't care about this kind of slippery behavior. This made Jean Lanting immediately have a higher opinion of this person surnamed Yuan. Gu Jiantang and Zhang Julu both looked at a corner in the distance at almost the same time. Jean Lanting was stunned for a moment. He wore the red python robes of a great eunuch, and stood there quietly like a red cat that had been hunting mice in the palace all year round. Yuan Tingshan clicked his tongue. An expert. Jean Lanting only glanced at him from a distance and didn't dare look again. He quickly lowered his head, afraid that this notorious eunuch would remember his appearance. There was no wall in the world that didn't have a crack. Presently, there was news from the palace that this powerful eunuch, the head of the court's 100,000 eunuchs, still held a revered position. He was no longer as unmoving as he had been for more than a decade. This was because a young eunuch who had entered the palace at a young age had been chosen by Empress Zhaoji. Together with a few servants, he could be said to have interacted with the emperor day and night. His name was Tonglu, and he had only recently been bestowed the surname of Song by the emperor. Song Tonglu came from the Directorate of Credentials of the 12 Directorates. His background was clean, and his master was the head eunuch of the Internal Affairs Bureau. For many years, he was one of the few eunuchs who could walk side by side with Han Diaosi in the palace. Song Tonglu had never made a mistake in the matter of imperial edicts. He was kind to others and had a gentle personality. Other than the difference between his position and Han Diaosi's, his personality was also the complete opposite. At this sensitive time when several princes in the capital were about to be made kings, the emperor was close to Song Tonglu, who had been promoted by the empress, and was estranged from Han Diaosi, who was close to Prince Zhao Kai. This undoubtedly made the powerful officials and nobles smell a trace of blood. The number of people who wanted Han Diaosi dead was no less than the number of officials who wanted Su Shao to fall from power. Some of the officials in the capital who had quietly placed their bets on the princes were secretly glad that they hadn't wasted their energy on Zhao Kai, whose background was unclear. For the first time in more than a decade, the red python-robed eunuch who hadn't appeared in court gently turned around and walked without a sound. Han Diaosi habitually walked in the shadows of the palace walls. It was impossible to see the expression on his clean white face. Chapter 652. Beimang didn't have a capital until Murong Empress usurped the throne. She used 400,000 soldiers and 900,000 people to build the capital. It took 9 years. The king of the northern courtyard, Su Huainan, and the father and son from the central plains, Zhang Rou and Zhang Lu, were responsible for the planning. Immortal Qilin and many geomancy masters also participated in the planning. After the new city was built, the royal family, nobles, and civil and military officials first moved in. Now, there were 30,000 prostitutes in Beimang. It could be seen that the capital of Beimang was magnificent and not inferior to the capital of Liang. It was just that after the capital was established, the empress still followed the ancient system of the 4 seasons of the tent, going out to patrol all 4 seasons. The Northern Mang's Painted Ash Conference, which had been criticized by the Central Plains for a long time, originated from this. This year's autumn tent tiger hunting and deer hunting was pushed back slightly. The influential nobles of the Northern Mang royal court were all talking about it. Many of the older nobles who had the qualifications to participate in the tent hunting in the past, but found excuses not to go, eagerly participated in it without exception. Unfortunately, they were greatly disappointed. In the capital, there was a declining branch of Taoism called Chongqing Taoist Temple. After losing the competition with Tao De sect for the national religion of Beimang, the incense was no longer as prosperous as before. Only a few old pilgrims would come to pray during the 9 Yen festival. It was hard to believe that 20 years ago, this place was called the top of Beimang's Taoist temple. Every festival, high officials and nobles would gather together with the common people. It was only because the immortal in the temple had opened a Daoist temple and immortals were willing to teach the art of longevity. These years, the Chongqing temple could only rely on some scholars who were rushing to take the imperial examinations to stay overnight. Perhaps the Chongqing temple's luck was really at its end. There had never been a scholar who was nominated after staying here. Over time, the 20 or so Taoists in the temple had been living more and more desolate lives. Fortunately, an old scholar came a few days ago and gave them a decent amount of silver. Only then were they able to eat. The old Confucian scholar who rented a dark and gloomy side room had a good conversational style. He often chatted with the old Taoist priests for an entire afternoon. When they were alone, the old Confucian scholar would flip through some of the scriptures that no one had been interested in for many years. He lived a leisurely and peaceful life. One day, a tall, sleepy man came to the Chongqing Taoist temple. He didn't even bat an eyelid as he swept the floor full of fallen leaves. The pilgrim asked twice in a warm voice. The little Taoist boy lazily picked up the broom and pointed to the old Confucian scholar's remote residence. The man walked over with a smile. After passing 2 courtyards, he found the old Confucian scholar sitting in the middle of the courtyard. The man respectfully said from the bottom of his heart, "Jing Yen greets the imperial decree of peace." The old scholar came back to his senses and smiled. He gestured for the newcomer of the chess and sword music school to sit down casually. Hong Jingyan put on a posture of listening attentively. The old Confucian scholar glanced at this proud student who had been deliberately suppressed by him. He said softly, "I know what you're here to ask for. I might as well be frank with you. If I were to shamelessly ask His Majesty for the iron cavalry of the Ruren 5 towns, I could also hand it over to you. However, this would put you at a disadvantage. It would be disadvantageous for you to display your skills in the future. The Ruren 5 towns are surrounded by the covetous Dong army. Even the capital and its surrounding regions are not generals with outstanding military achievements. You can't compare to them. Even if you succeed, how much empty space can you get? That's why I say that this kind of stiff robbery is not as good as a small, sharp strike without evil hands." Hong Jingyan asked with a smile, "Go directly to the tile-built gentleman's tavern?" The old Confucian scholar nodded. Hong Jingyan said with a bitter face, "You want me to gather tens of thousands of troops by myself?" The old Confucian scholar scolded with a smile, "You're as thick-skinned as ever. Don't think that just because I haven't been in the chess and sword music school all these years, I don't know that you have hooked up with the sons of the northern and southern nobles. Let alone tens of thousands, as long as you dare, even 100,000 wouldn't be a problem, right? Just those sons and daughters of the capital who crave military achievements would flock into Dragon Waste province without bringing their own personal guards and forcefully gather tens of thousands of troops. I'll say the ugly things first. This time, Your Majesty was hesitant about who to send to confront the Bailiang army. Was it Huang Songpu or Tuoba? I mentioned it in passing, so you chose Huang Songpu. This is because I don't want the situation of the northern and southern confrontation to become a situation of war on all fronts. I know that by using this king of the southern courtyard, who is good at defending, Bailiang won't have a falling out and will be willing to stop while we're ahead. This way, I'll have enough time to set up a trap. Only that wicked old turtle, Huang Longshan, loves to do wicked things. As for you, you'll be the first chess piece in Beimang's new game. You'll be the most important. How about it? Are you going or not?" Hong Jingyan furrowed his brows and did not immediately give a reply. The old Confucian scholar, who was already the emperor's tutor, said, "There's no rush. Let's make a decision after you've thought it through. If you feel that controlling the Ruren cavalry is more advantageous and can give me a convincing reason, I can very well let you go to the Ruren Mountains and become the Mountain King." Hong Jingyan softly said, "To tell the truth, whether I go to the gentleman's pavilion or the Ruren Mountains, right now, the sword chi is not by your side. I can't be at ease." The old Confucian scholar shook his head. "I know what I'm doing." Hong Jingyan looked around and laughed. "Are you really not going to meet those nobles in the imperial tent who are willing to dig 3 feet into the ground just to find you?" The old Confucian scholar indifferently said, Burning the stove in the officialdom is a great skill. Those fellows who have gone hunting to find me are actually burning a few sticks of incense to Su Huainan right now. Only then will His Majesty pay attention to them. Those who foolishly come to me to burn incense and pray to Buddha and Bodhisattva are all carrying pig heads and meat. Even if I were a true Bodhisattva, I'd still be sick of eating them. When the stove is cold, they can give me a bowl of porridge and a plate of pickles to fill my stomach and warm my heart. There was a long period of silence. Hong Jingyan suddenly stood up and bowed with his hands clasped in front of him. I ask the magistrate of peace to play a game of chess with me. The old Confucian scholar waved his hand, ordering him to leave. Hong Jingyan laughed at himself. He did not insist and left the Chongqing monastery. The old Confucian scholar slowly walked to the entrance of the monastery. The boy who was sweeping the floor was exhausted and sitting on the steps. There were already several baskets of fallen leaves at his feet. The old Confucian scholar smiled and bent down to pick up the broom. He helped the little boy sweep the floor. The poor scholar Chen Liangxi was in a small tea house. He muddle-headedly met a rich man from Bailiang who was talking about everything under the sun. He also muddle-headedly followed the hunchbacked and lame old man into a house. There were 2 jade lions in the house and a large plaque with golden words. The little beggar who had been reading with him along the way gently raised his head and read, Bailiang Palace. ####, please guarantee the monthly votes. You guys vote and I'll diligently write. It's that simple. The votes you guys throw at the first 3 days of the month are too ferocious. Therefore, in August, I'll definitely write a perfect second volume. Then, I'll write an even better third volume. He Xinliang. Chapter 653. Seeing that the 2 horses were killed by Su Longxiang, Su Weisheng asked the crossbowman to bring 2 more horses. Ugly was not suitable to show himself, so Su Weisheng sent him to hide in the dark. Blue Bird drove the carriage. Su Fengnian sat in the carriage while Su Weisheng rode the horse outside. Su Beiji sat in the same room as Su Longxiang, his entire body feeling uneasy. Right now, Ren Tu's second son's infamy had spread far and wide in northern Mang. No one doubted his ability to break through enemy lines. Su Beiji was truly scared that a single word of disagreement would cause his limbs to be torn apart like a grasshopper's legs by this withered yellow youth. Su Fengnian lifted the curtain and said, I originally wanted to enter through Toppling Horse Pass. Which way do you want to go? Su Weisheng said calmly, I'm just giving you a ride. Father gave me tens of thousands of cavalrymen, not to send them to their deaths. Su Fengnian deliberately ignored the innuendo in his words and said with a smile, When we part, I'll give you a gift. Su Weisheng did not comment. She walked for 7 to 8 miles, stopped the horse and said, Although there are no more than 1,000 Beimang soldiers near Gu Maolong, there are still many horse stables left. Su Fengnian got off the carriage and handed Su Weisheng a bag. She said indifferently, It's okay. Other than Bluebird and Ugly, there's also an otherworldly item wandering 100 miles away. It has the finger mysterious realm. Su Weisheng hung the cotton bag on the side of the saddle. Su Fengnian pleaded, Don't throw it away without taking a look. Su Weisheng hesitated and did not rush to turn the horse around. Su Fengnian was familiar with his second sister's cold temperament. He said, It's the head of the 5th raccoon. Su Weisheng frowned and said, The mountain master of Bing Ti Mountain, Dongzhu's father-in-law? Su Fengnian nodded. Su Weisheng asked, You and a few others succeeded in the sneak attack? Su Fengnian was speechless. Su Beiji, who got off the carriage with Su Fengnian but stood far away, said softly, Second Commandery Princess, His Royal Highness killed the 5th raccoon by himself. I Su Beiji can testify. Su Weisheng sneered and said, How did the king of North Courtyard, Su Huainan's concubine's grandson, change his master? When do you plan to go to Liang Imperial Court and become a slave of 3 surnames? As expected of Su Weisheng, who knew Beimang like the back of his hand, Su Beiji did not explain anything to her relentless criticism. Su Fengnian tried to smooth things over and said, Second sister, can you not scare Juzi? He's a good person. Not long ago, he even praised your poetry and said that he wanted to compare notes with you. Su Weisheng patted the ancient sword at his waist and said with a smile, "Compare notes? Compare notes on swordsmanship? Didn't you tell him that I like to compare notes with scholars and common people?" Su Beiji had truly experienced the rudeness of Bailiang's second commandery princess. Su Fengyan said helplessly, all right. He patted the horses but lightly and let Su Weisheng gallop away. Su Fengyan and Su Beiji looked at each other and smiled. They both felt relieved. Su Beiji sighed softly and said, "He has the demeanor of Empress Murong." Su Fengyan hugged his neck and scolded jokingly, "How dare you talk about my sister like that? Do you want to die?" The scholar, who was almost out of breath from being strangled, shouted, "How is this belittling?" Su Fengyan let go of his hand and sat in the carriage with him. "You'll know in the future." After sitting down, Su Fengyan threw the sword case to the black-clothed youth who was grinning from ear to ear. "Huang Manor, there are 3 swords in there. I'll give them to you. Didn't you get stabbed by a willow branch? Next time you see him, return the 3 swords to him." Su Longxiang held the sword case and laughed foolishly. Su Fengyan turned his head to Su Beiji and said, "Bailiang Palace has an abundant collection of books. If there's anything you like, just take it. It'll be your personal collection. Treat it as my meeting gift to you. How about it?" Su Beiji smiled sincerely and said, "It's enough." Su Fengyan thought for a while and said, "When we reach the prince's mansion, why don't you change your name?" Su Beiji shook his head and thanked Su Fengyan for his good intentions. It was obviously not wise to parade around Bailiang with the identity of Su Huainan's grandson. However, there were some things that Su Beiji did not want to shrink back from. Su Fengyan said regretfully, "Su Juzi. What a delightful name." Su Beiji reminded him, "Your Highness, you don't have Diwu Raccoon's head anymore." Su Fengyan said, "Oh," and snapped his fingers. Not long after, a slender, snow-white wrist reached into the carriage curtain. When Su Beiji saw the happy face of the otherworldly item in the red robe, he had goosebumps all over his body. Su Beiji forced a smile and flattered him against his will. "Your Highness is confident in everything. You are worthy of being the heir of a vassal state." Su Fengyan waved his hand and the otherworldly item's elixir infant floated away from the carriage. Then he held Su Beiji's hand and said with a smile, "You and I admire each other so much. It's a pity we didn't meet earlier." The corner of Su Beiji's mouth twitched and he whispered, "Your Highness, did you also say the words 'a pity we didn't meet earlier' to Diwu Raccoon?" Su Fengyan smiled and slapped Su Beiji to the ground. Then he said softly, "I like to walk the same path again. They say that there's no turning back in this world. Taking advantage of the opportunity to walk the path, it's very comfortable." Without the otherworldly item's intimidation, Su Beiji became more courageous and said, "Your Highness, didn't you have a secret conversation with that retainer when you went out earlier? Didn't you want him to arrange something so that you could secretly meet Yozhou's Gai commandant, Huang Fuqiong?" Su Fengyan didn't say yes and only asked curiously, "You even know Huang Fuqiong?" Chapter 654. Su Beiji nodded. "At Ruoshui Hut, Grandpa said that you helped him to the position and used him to stir up the military in Yuzhou. At first, I didn't think highly of Huang Fuxi, but now, I don't dare to underestimate him." Su Fengyan asked, "Have you prepared how to show off your talent to Su Xiao?" Su Beiji smiled and said, "A woman's pregnancy can only be seen after a few months. It's just a matter of learning, so it takes time. I have some glib tongue, but I can deal with other people. After meeting the second princess, I really don't want to go to the Prince of Northern Liang to be scolded. I've already thought about it. When the time comes, I'll ask the King of Bailiang for a remote and desolate county. I'll start as a lowly official. I'll be able to do some practical things, and it won't delay me from sending a small gift to your Highness. The gift itself will take 1 or 2 years to complete." Su Fengyan was surprised. "You can really endure being unknown for a few years?" Su Beiji calmly said, "When have I ever been famous?" Su Fengyan grabbed Su Beiji. "Su Juzi, you're really famous." Su Beiji smiled and tried to break free from Su Fengyan's grip, but he couldn't do it. He said helplessly, "Your Highness, even if it's just a compliment, please show me more sincerity." Su Fengnian increased his strength and nodded with a smile. Okay. Show me more sincerity. Su Beiji, who had taken off the mustached man's skin, was fair and elegant. At this moment, he was in so much pain that his face turned red. Su Fengnian laughed and released his grip. Su Beiji angrily said, "Bullying others with martial arts? Is that what a real man should do?" Su Fengnian, who had also restored his true appearance, snapped his fingers again. Su Beiji thought that the otherworldly item wanted to join the fun again. He was so scared that he kept quiet out of fear. Su Beiji had been on tenterhooks for a long time, but the otherworldly item was nowhere to be seen. Su Fengnian giggled and said, "I just snapped my fingers. Do you really think that the otherworldly item in the princess tomb is some kind of earth immortal? Do you really think that I can sense it from 100 miles away just by snapping my fingers?" Su Beiji took a deep breath and lowered his head to flip through a book that he had found with great difficulty in the inn in Maolong military town. Although he looked furious, his eyes were gentle and there was a smile on his face. He was once afraid that the monarch he had to serve was a mediocre person with great ambition but little ability. However, he was even more afraid of meeting a master who seemed to be respectful and modest, who on the surface wished to sleep on the same bed and eat the same bowl as you, but in the depths of his heart, he only treated scholars as murderers. Su Beiji didn't want his knowledge to be wasted on reading people's expressions and guessing their thoughts. Su Beiji put down the book and said worriedly, "Before you came to Beimang, the Liang imperial court had already started to arrange for the princes to leave the capital and be enfeoffed as county kings. County kings don't have military power, but they can participate in local, state, and county politics. These first-generation county kings of the Liang dynasty after the spring and autumn period were given a single title. Currently, we know that there are 3 kings of Tang, Chu, and Shu. I think that the king of Shu will most likely be Zhao Kai. The second king of Jing and Zhao Sun obviously had an expert to advise him. He was the first one to take the initiative to hand over all military power, which is bound to give the king of Yanqi and the king of Guangling a headache. I heard that you had a particularly bad relationship with the old king of Jing, and Xiangfan is also one of the most important cities in the world. No matter if it's east or south, it's a place that must be fought over." Su Fengnian smiled and said, "Zhao Sun beat me up like a drowning dog, and I also stole the Princess Jing and that he secretly admires. That brat can't wait to skin me alive and pull out my tendons to vent his anger." Su Beiji was stunned. He gritted his teeth and asked, "Wait, what do you mean you stole the Princess Jing'an?" Su Fengnian smiled and said, "Her name is Pei Nanwei, one of the few great beauties of the Liang dynasty. I happened to pass by Xiangfan on my second trip and took her to Bailiang Palace." Su Beiji kicked Su Fengnian's calf. Su Fengnian didn't bicker with him. He patted the dust off and said helplessly, "She's not your wife, what are you so anxious about?" Su Beiji glared at him. The sallow and emaciated black-clothed Su Longxiang didn't get angry. He was born to be able to sense good intentions. Su Fengnian put away his cynicism and said softly, "Don't worry, I've done enough ridiculous things. From now on, I'll only be messing around in Bailiang." Su Beiji snorted coldly. Su Fengnian quickly revealed his foxtail and said, "But if a beauty comes to Bailiang to walk right into my trap, I won't refuse her." Su Beiji was about to speak, but Su Fengnian's words made him swallow his words. "Why are you acting like my wife? Why do you care about this?" Su Fengnian pretended to be terrified and shifted his butt. "Su Juzi, don't tell me you're gay? Let me say this first, I can't wrong myself. If you can't bear it and really want to make a move, I can pay you to go to a brothel and find a young husband." Su Beiji cursed for the first time. Su Fengnian said calmly, "Su Juzi, you're the first celebrity I've personally recruited. I'll arrange for Dannying to stay by your side. Ask yourself honestly, am I good to you?" Su Beiji lay straight in the carriage and covered his face with the book, pretending to be dead. Su Fengnian lifted the curtain with a wicked smile and picked up a pot of green ant wine that his second sister, Su Weisheng, had purposely left behind. He sat with Huang Manor behind Bluebird. A light breeze brushed past his face and the silver hair at his temples swayed softly. His black hair entered Beimang, and his white hair returned to Bailiang. Su Fengyan stretched and drank a mouthful of spicy wine. He didn't know why, but he remembered the sword outside the gates of hell. He softly said, frowning eyebrows erect, words like thunder, the evil flood dragon of the Swallow River is fat. Wielding a sword in the air, I'll return at the second watch. Chapter 655. The sky was just beginning to brighten. Su Fengyan and his party handed over their official documents. Probably because Liang Meng had declared war, the border patrol was a lot stricter than when Su Fengyan left the pass with the Fish Dragon gang. One of the border guards lifted the curtain of the carriage with a spear and examined every face. When he saw Su Fengyan, he was obviously startled for a moment. However, the official documents were real and there was nothing wrong with them. But the following few weapons became a thorny obstacle for both sides. Their luggage had to be carefully searched, the sword sheath, the spring and autumn sword, the spring thunder saber were all searched out. This made the Tumbling Horse Pass's armored guards feel as if they were facing a great enemy. A few silent glances were exchanged, and a group of riders rode their horses over. Sparks flew everywhere, and the smarter Jianghu people did not dare to pass through at this time. Many of the border tea and horse businesses were also stopped. They had to avoid the sharp edge and endure this period of time before making a good plan. Su Fengyan and his party did not look like merchants, nor did they look like the children of a military family. Carrying so many sabers and swords, how could the Tumbling Horse Pass city guards, who were already on their last legs, lower their guard? Not long after Su Fengyan stepped out of the carriage, a second group of cavalry arrived. The leader of the group was the number 1 young master of Toppling Horse Pass, Zhou Ziru. Zhou Ziru had a good memory. When he saw this familiar face that used to belong to that small gang, he frowned. In the past half a year, the Fish Dragon gang had passed through Toppling Horse Pass several times, but nothing happened. Zhou Ziru suppressed his anger and did not act on impulse. He still remembered how his father, Shichang's deputy captain, and his sworn enemy, Captain Chui Gong, Han Tao, had bowed and scraped in front of Captain Gui Huang Fujin. After that, Huang Fujin walked down the city wall alone and rode alone to a village not far from Toppling Horse Pass. Zhou Ziru did not dare to investigate the inside story, but he did not dare to make things difficult for the Fish Dragon gang. At this time, when he saw this strange white-haired young member of the Fish Dragon gang, Zhou Ziru was also in a difficult position. If he let him go, it would be against Bailiang's military law. If he did not let him go, he would step on an iron plate. He was afraid that both father and son would be controlled by Captain Gui Huang Fujin. Su Fengyan looked at Zhou Ziru's men and horses. He was actually a real second lieutenant. With a bronze commander's seal, he could lead hundreds of soldiers. He had crossed a big threshold. He smiled and said, "Second Lieutenant Zhou, in addition to our sabers and swords, the 3 swords in the sword case can be left at Toppling Horse Pass. When I go to the provincial government office to get the letter of approval, I will ask someone to take the sword case back." Zhou Ziru nodded with a straight face. He carried his spear and rode away. Su Fengyan sat back in the carriage. Su Beiji said in a low voice, "The Bailiang cavalry does have a reason to be the best in the world." The carriage moved slowly. Su Fengyan lifted the curtain and pointed out the window. He smiled and said, "In the past, there would often be martial artists from outside the village competing in martial arts on that declining stage to gain some good luck and prestige. Now, you won't be able to see it. Generally speaking, martial artists who know some small tricks won't advertise in the local area. The people in the village know everything about the outside, so it's not easy to cheat people of their money. If they dare to open a martial arts school or school in their hometown, unless the place is too small and they haven't seen the world, their skills can't be considered too bad. The local martial arts schools in Bailiang have always been more miserable. They have to live with their tails between their legs. Most of them have to rely on the government to do things. When I went out this time, I was following a small sect that had lost power in Lingzhou. Every family has their own difficulties. However, it also gave me a rough idea. Is it possible to support a school similar to the chess and sword music school outside of Bailiang and outside of Bailiang? One in the light, one in the dark. It's interesting to think about letting the puppets under me become the chief of the Wulin Alliance. Su Fengnian might have said it as a joke, but Su Beiji thought about it seriously. He said, "The imperial court has its laws, and the Jianghu has its rules. They might not be the same. Let's not talk about how much money you have to spend. If you don't personally put in a lot of effort, can you really play it well?" Since Su Beiji was so serious, Su Fengnian didn't have the nerve to continue speaking without thinking. He followed along and said, "You can use other people's stones to polish jade. First, you can copy what the Empress of Beimang did. As for whether or not you can't acclimatize, you have to try before you know. You also know that the prince's mansion has an armory. It can make many Jianghu people with mediocre martial virtues but extremely martial fanatics scramble like ducks. In the past, they were rejected at the door. If I take the initiative to open a path, the situation will be different. You might not know, but I have a bit of relationship with the Xianyuan family in Mount Hui to the south. The new head of the Xianyuan family has a frightening ambition. I reckon that no matter how big the family property is, it won't be able to withstand her squandering. I will first try to sound her out and see if she will take the bait." Su Beiji glanced at Su Fengnian and asked, "Heir apparent wants to use this matter to test me?" Su Fengnian smiled and waved his hand. "Don't be so suspicious. With your personality of going to a dead end and your unbearably smelly scholarly aura, you're not suitable for this kind of pimping business. I will find someone else." Su Beiji laughed coldly. "You want to provoke me?" Su Fengnian shook his head and sighed. "It's good that you're recommending yourself to be a small government official. Otherwise, I would really be annoyed by you. I'm lucky to have met you now. A few years ago, when I met someone as talented and knowledgeable as you, who was also quite good-looking, I could beat down 17 or 18 of them in one go. Of course, I brought along my vicious servants and vicious dogs." Chapter 656. Su Beiji's mind wandered and he suddenly said, "Why do I feel that the future king of Shu will take another step forward? Although Western Shu has always been a place of defense, Zhao Kai himself is the leader of the forces in the western regions. If he can really kill two birds with one stone and cut off the connection between Bailiang and Shu Zhao, the Zhao family's decision would be very ruthless. If Zhao Kai, who has always been an insignificant figure in the imperial court, can really gain a firm foothold in the position of king of Shu, and if the position of crown prince is always empty, I think this is not a good situation for Bailiang." Su Fengnian smiled and said, "Zhao Kai is going to the western regions. It's hard to say whether he will live or die." Su Beiji frowned and said, "You can leave Beimang, but he can't leave the western regions. If there is such a thing as the Son of Heaven, then Zhao Kai, who is a prince, is much more suitable than you." Su Fengnian nodded and said, "That makes sense. Then I will go and kill Zhao Kai, an eye for an eye." Su Beiji was surprised and said, "Really?" Su Fengnian said calmly, "I will personally bring people there." Su Beiji began to calculate in his mind. Su Fengnian had already noticed a detail. When Su Beiji was thinking carefully, his fingers would subconsciously draw horizontal and vertical lines in the air. Su Fengnian suddenly thought of the unlucky phrase, "Extreme wisdom is bound to hurt." Therefore, Su Fengnian asked Bluebird to stop the horse and buy a basket of meat buns as a reward for Su Juzi. He had personally tasted the meat buns sold in the small shop at Tuma Pass. It was called good quality and cheap. Su Fengnian was waiting for Bluebird to return. Through the curtain, he saw a group of children jumping to the private school to study. Among them was Zhao Yusong. Su Fengnian smiled knowingly and took out a fake secret manual from the Wu family's Nine Swords ruins. He called Bluebird softly and asked her to give it to the obedient and filial child. Yusong, who was silently reciting poems, was suddenly stopped by a green-clothed elder sister. Then the beautiful elder sister handed him a book. On the cover, there were 4 big words, "The Art of the Bull." It was a divine art. How could it not be a peerless secret manual? However, the child was more shocked than excited. Moreover, although the child was young, he was very smart and knew that the Jianghu was dangerous. Moreover, his mother always said that he should not take advantage of others. Therefore, Yusong did not reach out to take the secret manual. However, some of the innocent children around him were cheering. They almost hugged the green-clothed elder sister's thigh and begged her to accept them as disciples. They thought that they could become masters in 1 day and be invincible in 3 days. Yusong refused to accept the secret manual. Even though Bluebird said that it was fake and not worth much, he still did not accept it. Bluebird, who did not have the experience of selling secret manuals, could only look at her master for help. When she looked at him, Yusong was overjoyed. He saw Brother Su. He ran to the side of the carriage and looked up at Brother Su, whose face was covered by the curtain. He smiled brightly and was about to say something when he patted his head. He carefully took out a few coins that he hid very well and went to the bun shop to buy 2 big meat buns. When he returned to the side of the carriage, he was not afraid of scalding his hands. He tiptoed and handed the buns to Su Fengnian. Su Fengnian held the curtain with one hand and took the meat buns wrapped in lotus leaves with the other hand. He smiled and said, "This is the money your mother gave you to buy the book. Aren't you afraid of being scolded when you go back?" The child shook his head vigorously and grinned, "Of course not. If my mother knew that Brother Su was coming back, she would be more generous than me. Our family is not poor now. My mother is good at embroidery and can make a lot of money a month. My mother also said that there is a place called weaving in the government and wanted to invite her to go there to make money." Su Fengnian knew that Huang Fujin must have hinted to someone. The amount of hinting was just right. He did not treat the mother and daughter unfairly, nor did he disturb their peaceful life. Su Fengnian took a bite of the meat bun and pointed at Bluebird. He smiled and said, "This sister is my friend. I don't know if the secret manual is real or fake. Anyway, I don't need it, so I'll give it to you." If one really practiced this kind of secret manual, even if they had 100 copies, they would not be able to master it even if they worked hard for 10 lifetimes. However, it was not to the extent that they would damage their bodies. They were the most worthless introductory chants of some Jianghu sections. They outlined some stupid tricks that could be found on the streets. They could only be considered to have some benefits to strengthen the body. "Okay." The child took the secret book with a smile, and then solemnly bowed to the green bird. He said in a methodical manner, "Thank you, fairy sister, for giving me this book." The green bird, who had a distant temperament, was also amused and smiled slightly. After receiving benefits, the child with a good upbringing naturally wanted to return the favor. His eyes filled with anticipation, he asked, "Brother Su isn't in a hurry to leave, right? Come to my house for lunch? My mother will definitely be happy. She always tells me that when I grow up, I have to repay her kindness." "Heh, but my mother calls Brother Su as young Master Su." Su Fengnian shook his head and said, "It's no trouble. You still have to go to the private school to study. It's the busy time of the farm season. Your mother will definitely have to work in the fields. Besides, I'm in a hurry to leave Tuma Pass, so I won't stay." The child's face was filled with regret, but he did not stubbornly insist. Su Fengnian smiled and waved his hand. The carriage continued south along the road. On the way back south, the paddy fields of Tuma Pass had already turned from the green and yellow of the Ruran Mountains to a golden yellow. In the vast expanse of golden yellow that stretched as far as the eye could see, there was a young miss dressed in simple clothing that could not hide her graceful figure bending over to harvest rice. Originally, she did not have much land in the village. After she had more money, she could not bear the boredom and bought a piece of land here. The transfer of land deeds was an extremely complicated process. She had thought that the village side would not be able to get through, but she had not expected that the government side would be surprisingly easy to talk to. It was as if they were afraid that she would not buy the land. After she received the land deed, she had been nervous for a long time, thinking that there was a trap that she had not seen through. She had worked hard to save up some money. If she was cheated again, she would slap herself a few times and scold herself for being greedy and for suffering. Fortunately, it was already the autumn harvest and harvesting of rice. Behind her, there were many piles of golden rice that were her family's food. The young miss was filled with a joy that she could not tell others. She was born in Miji, a place that was filled with beauties. She was also an outstanding person in the surrounding 100 li. Many women who were not as beautiful as her had already become the concubines of officials and soldiers, or had been raised as canaries in large private mansions. She did not envy them. She only felt that it was very good to stay here, to stay by Yusong's side. She straightened her back and wiped her sweat. But how was their benefactor, young Master Su? Her beautiful face turned red and she softly scolded herself for being shameless. Chapter 657. They passed through the western region with the silver vase in hand. Zhao Kai walked the same path as the white-robed monk who traveled thousands of miles to the west. In Zhao Kai's party, in addition to the 200 valiant Yulin guards, there were also more than a dozen imperial bodyguards with yellow belts and golden sabers around their waists. Half of them were young men and half were old men. Any old man who was picked was an outstanding talent in the Wulin 10 or 20 years ago. In addition, there was also the female Dharma king of the esoteric sect, who was greatly valued by His Majesty, and a concubine who had no children. After shaving off her 3,000 strands of worry, not only did her appearance and bearing not lessen, but it also made her face, which was hard to tell whether it was gentle or dignified, even more bewitching. She was indeed worthy of being the six-pearl bodhisattva with the 6 signs. Zhao Kai had just passed through the world's most dangerous jiangha, which was known as the yellow crane flying sword. He rubbed his butt and looked back to ask the female bodhisattva beside him, did the Daoist master's mansion of Longhu Mountain's beard transformation scripture go from here to the western region? It was also said that after the old lord left 3,000 words, he turned into Buddha and crossed the quicksand to the west. Why didn't I feel any celestial aura or Buddhist aura? The woman who once led the ghosts out of Xiangfan in front of the crown prince of Bailiang and the old god of swords Li Chungang did not ride a horse. She insisted on walking like an ascetic monk. She said flatly, "There is purple qi coming from the east and going to the west. It's just that you're in the mountains and don't know the mountains." Zhao Kai snorted and pointed at his own nose. "You're talking about me? You don't say. Before I met you in Xiangfan, there was a very celestial senior in the reed marsh who praised me for my luck, second only to the princess of a fallen country in West Chu. His insight is like a torch." She ignored the prince's complacency and fluttered forward in her plain cassock. Zhao Kai subconsciously looked to the north and licked his dry lips. His face was gloomy. According to his second master, Bailiang had been entrusted to Su Shao because he had no other choice. The Lianggan corridor was the throat of the northwest. Once the corridor was opened, the million cavalrymen of Bailiang could easily dive into the central plains from the Huangshui Valley like lions hunting rabbits. In fact, it was not easy for Bailiang to set up defenses. Most of the time there were no barriers along the border. For example, if it were not for the Bailiang cavalry stationed at the wasteland north of Tuma Pass, or if any of the military brigades were used to relieve the defense, perhaps it would have long been crushed by Baimang's steel cavalry into a broken bamboo basket, leaking water everywhere. Moreover, the advantages and disadvantages of northern Mang lay in the fact that northern Mang's territory was so vast that it was almost as vast as the entire Central Plains. This formed a thick wall in the game of Go, which was something that northern Liang could not compare to at all. Therefore, northern Mang could afford to lose several big games, while northern Liang could afford to lose once and lose the whole game. Zhao Kai muttered to himself, "If Su Shao doesn't become the local emperor, who can? Gu Jiantang? Maybe he won't even last 5 years." Zhao Kai curled his lips and rode close to a carriage. He lifted the curtain to take a look. It was the only remaining seal general, the golden-armored man. Zhao Kai laughed. "Great master is much more generous than second master." Zhao Kai put down the curtain, a haze that lingered in his heart. From mocking and slandering Buddha to destroying Buddha, second master, who had the potential to become the world's Buddha, had been indifferent and did nothing. In recent years, he had simply disappeared. His great master seemed to be in danger in the palace. He had no choice but to go west this time. After all, when the tree moved, the person would die. Zhao Kai, whose throat was almost smoking, swallowed hard. He thought of the peer who was destined to be his life and death enemy and said softly, "Do you dare to come and kill me?" He looked back at the sword gate, which should be the easiest place to set up an ambush. "Su Fengyan, it seems that you don't have a chance." Zhao Kai twisted his neck and sneered, "Bah, you don't even dare to go to the gambling table?" Yu Chou personally sent a message to Huang Fushi. This powerful Commandant Gui immediately went to Judao City and waited respectfully. He did not dare to alarm the local government and the garrison. He only brought a group of valiant retinues that Bailiang Palace had specially assigned to him. Huang Fu she sat alone in the carriage and thought of all kinds of countermeasures. Now, Huang Fu she's reputation had taken a sharp turn. As a top warrior of a top sect in Jianghu, he had risked his life to fight Bailiang Palace. Therefore, people in Jianghu had to give him a thumbs up and praise him as a real man. After he joined Bailiang Palace and became a lackey, people in Bailiang all scolded him as a good-for-nothing. For the sake of his promotion and wealth, he had sacrificed almost all the lives of his entire clan and smashed the golden signboard that he had painstakingly accumulated for several generations. However, the honor and disgrace of Jianghu were one thing, but the military and political affairs of Bailiang were completely different. Everyone in Yuzhou was afraid of this jackal. Huang Fu she's official position was not low. He was the real Commandant Gui, a first-class general with real power in Yuzhou. In addition, Huang Fu she had diligently walked through the vast Yuzhou like an old farmer checking his crops. Although the fence-sitters in Yuzhou might not have good moral conduct, they were not necessarily all good-for-nothings who only knew how to flatter. Among the many commandants who joined Huang Fu shi, there were many young men who had made great military contributions. These guys had tied themselves together with Huang Fu shi and had already grown up. The several generals in Yuzhou who had the same official position as Commandant Gui finally realized that Huang Fu she did not come to Yuzhou purely to fish for profits, but he was determined to compete with them for military power. In the officialdom, there was a carrot and a pit, and each pit was worth a fortune. When you crossed the line and wanted to take over a few more pits, it was more painful than the hatred of snatching a wife. Over the past half a year, several generals who were in cahoots with each other had teamed up to trip up Huang Fu shi. Commandant Gui also resolutely fought back. The two sides were fighting fiercely. If it were not for the war in Liangmang, they might have fought with real swords and spears. Chapter 658. Rumor had it that a general had said, "Even if you, Huang Fu shi, are the new favorite of the great general, can you not follow the rules and blindly snatch territory? Back then, I went through fire and water with the great general. Is the great general someone who likes the new and hates the old? If we really fall out, at worst, we will all be tied up and brought to the king's mansion. I don't believe the great general will favor a guy like you, whose family is as dirty as a toilet." There was a brocade box beside Huang Fu shi. Inside it was a rare folding fan carved by a famous master. Bamboo Blade City was famous for its bamboo carvings. It was popular in the city for officials to give each other books and fans. This fan cost Huang Fu shi 3,000 taels of silver. It was made by Huang Wenho of the Jinshi family. Within the bamboo fan, there were more than 10,000 words. The words were small and had the charm of a famous calligraphy. Huang Fu she came from a powerful family in the martial arts world. When he was young, he was also an elegant young master who excelled in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. His vision was naturally top-notch. The reason why he chose the bamboo fan, other than the fan's elegance, was that Huang Wenho was praised by fans in the industry for his vision. However, Huang Fu shi knew that this old man who did not show off was a genuine martial artist. Huang Fu she bought the fan with no less money than Huang Wenho. However, if Huang Wenho was not willing to work for him, then the 3,000 taels of silver would be the price to buy his life. Huang Fu she intuitively felt that Bailiang's Jianghu would be taken over by someone sooner or later. He was just feeling the stones to cross the river and explore the way. It would be best if he won the bet, but if not, it was fine to spend some money. Huang Fu she did not even care about his face and family, so why would he care about those worldly possessions that he would not bring with him when he died? Huang Fu she smiled lightly. He had been waiting outside Bamboo Blade City for an entire morning and did not lift the curtain once. "If I, Huang Fu shi, dare to go bankrupt on the gambling table, would you generals with dead wives dare to?" The carriage slowly turned around and drove into the city. Only then did Huang Fu shi lift a corner of the curtain. He looked at the simple carriage in front of him and gently put it down. The carriage stopped at the entrance of an ordinary inn in Bamboo Blade City. Huang Fu Jin got off the carriage, leaving behind the elite retinue that would never be loyal to him in this lifetime, and quietly followed. Along the way, Lieutenant General Gui did not look sideways. They followed him to a quiet single-family residence in the backyard. After Su Fengnian sat down, he asked Bluebird to buy some dyes. His current appearance was too unbecoming. He beckoned Huang Fujin, who was standing at the door, to enter the house. The burly general prostrated himself on the ground without any hesitation, the brocade box placed beside his hand. Su Fengnian didn't pretend to be amiable and approachable. Su Beiji helped him take the brocade box. Su Fengnian opened it and took a look. With a snap, he opened his folding fan and squinted his eyes. He smiled and said, "It's a piece of art. One look and I can tell it's the work of someone from the Jinling school." Huang Wenho? Then wouldn't General Huang Fu have spent a year's salary on it? Huang Fujin said softly, "As long as your highness doesn't mind dirtying your hands." Su Fengnian waved his bamboo fan, feeling that it was too romantic to wave a fan in autumn. Thus, he tossed it to Su Beiji, who was quietly drinking tea at the side. Only then did he say, "Huang Wenho is very reputable in Bamboo Blade City. Don't look at him as a scholar who migrated from southern Tang to Bailiang. In these years, he has mingled well with both the black and the white. The prince's residence has a notice with his name on it. If you didn't report your name and didn't use the title of an official to pressure him, this old man might not be willing to sell you this fan, right? His fan is said to be able to exchange for a 7th-grade official in Bamboo Blade City. According to the market price in Yuzhou, how can a few thousand taels buy it?" Huang Fujin said calmly, "I did report my name before Huang Wenho handed over the fan." Su Fengnian asked with a smile, "Was there a reason?" Huang Fujin replied, "Many of the big ruffians in Bamboo Blade City have acknowledged Huang Wenho, who is proficient in feng shui, as their master. I was wondering if this local snake was tactful. After all, Bailiang is your highness's Bailiang. Since they are making a living here and are so fat, they should at least put in some effort when they need to. One cannot forget one's roots. However, your highness, please be at ease. When I went to the Huang family, I didn't pull a banner. I only calmly made 2 transactions with Huang Wenho. One was the transaction of the bamboo fan, and the other was that I took care of his adopted sons in all aspects. He gave me gossip from all walks of life. Of course, it's inevitable that there will be bloodshed when necessary. At that time, both I and Huang Wenho had spoken openly, so it can't be said to be bullying others." Su Fengnian and Su Beiji, who were still talking about that Jianghu matter not long ago, looked at each other and smiled. Su Fengnian nodded and said, "Stand up and speak." Huang Fujin didn't dare to be pretentious. He stood up and lowered his eyelids, looking at the tips of his feet from beginning to end. Su Fengnian smiled and said, "I'll read the secret letter you sent to Wutang'an on time when I go back. If I'm satisfied, I should be satisfied." Su Fengnian smiled and had Huang Fujin sit down. "Commandant Gui, it's not appropriate for you to speak while standing." Huang Fujin shook his head and said in a low voice, "I don't dare to be impudent when I speak while standing." Su Fengnian joked, "You learned this from our Bailiang's administrator, didn't you? 3 times you see, 3 times you don't see. One of them is that you don't kneel until you see Prince Liang." Huang Fujin was speechless. Using words to express loyalty to his royal highness, whose temperament was unpredictable, was futile. It was better to do things while standing. Su Fengnian waved his hand and said, "Go do what you need to do." Huang Fujin retreated step by step, his palms slick with sweat, and gently closed the door. Su Beiji's eyes were almost glued to the words engraved on the fan. Without raising his head, he asked, "This is Yozhou's Commandant Huang Fujin?" Su Fengnian grunted and said, "How about I give you the fan?" Su Beiji said without the slightest trace of politeness, "Sure, deduct it from my salary." Su Fengnian rolled his eyes and said, "It's easy for you to say. How many years will it take?" Su Beiji carefully stared at the fragrant yellow bamboo cloud and said matter-of-factly, "Until I die." Chapter 659. After learning that Li Hanlin, who had been the chief of crossbowmen in the upper reaches, had returned from the border, and since he was not in the prince's mansion, then this kid might be in the new administrator's mansion in Lingzhou. Su Fengnian took a slight detour and entered Lingzhou, which was even more romantic than Liangzhou. In the past, every time Li Hanlin was the master of his own territory, he would entertain his friends who had grown up with him. Not once had he disappointed Su Fengnian. They would visit the best brothels, drink the most expensive wine, deal with the most domineering playboys, and flirt with the most beautiful women. Su Fengnian still remembered that other than Yan Qiji, that old-fashioned bookworm, Kong Wushi had his first time here. After the event, the courtesan had given him a very solid red packet, which made Kong Wushi so embarrassed that his face turned red. He was so moved that he almost wanted to marry the courtesan, who only knew a little about the ways of the world, in a sedan chair. Su Fengnian had to persuade this stupid ox not to do anything stupid. Su Fengnian's hair had been dyed black by Blue Bird, and he rode on a horse. When Su Fengnian first entered Beimang, he had paid attention to the post, the beacon, and farming. Su Beiji was the same. He only sighed. Compared to Beimang, Beiliang is still too small. If its territory was a little bigger, for example, if it could swallow up Shishu and Nanzhao at lightning speed, Su Beiji did not continue speaking. After Su Fengnian and his younger brother Huang Man'er met, they did not speak much. In these years, the two brothers had spent more time together than apart. They had said most of what they could say. Those who were truly close did not need those seemingly passionate words. If they met Li Hanlin, Su Fengnian could guarantee that this brother's first words would be, "Brother Feng, Tiger Hill House, let's go." Huang Man'er had clearly grown up a lot. He smiled less and was more silent. Occasionally, there was a trace of determination between his brows. Speaking of which, it was strange. Ever since they were young, Huang Man'er had never been close to their second sister, Su Weisheng. One of them was extremely intelligent, as if she had a mind of her own, while the other was simple-minded, as if she had no mind of her own, so they couldn't get along. However, Huang Man'er and their eldest sister, Su Zhihu, were only relatively close. Ever since they were young, Huang Man'er's heart had always been in sync with her older brother, Su Fengnian. This time, when Huang Man'er came down from Mount Longhu, he actually knew to go to Shangyin Academy to visit his second sister. He even gave his beloved tiger Kuei to Su Weisheng. This made Su Fengnian feel very surprised. Before reaching the capital of Lingzhou, he found out from the conversations of the people in the tea houses and restaurants that Li Hanlin, the great calamity Li, had a change of heart after being trampled by a warhorse. He had really earned great military merits at the border. This time, when he returned to his hometown, he did not even go to the brothel. He did not stay at home for more than a few days before leaving with his fellow soldiers. This made the frightened people of Lingzhou sigh that they did not understand the ways of the world. Of the 4 young masters of Beiliang, other than His Royal Highness, who was still frivolous, Yan Qi, who was originally somewhat talented, had gathered the relatives of the emperor. He had also benefited from Jean Lanting's resignation and became a noble Jean Lanting. Of course, this was only a small Huang family. The great Huang family had a small Huang family with enough qualifications to replace Jean Lanting. Kong Wuqi had entered the imperial army. Now, even Li Hanlin, who was endlessly spoiled by the administrator, had great accomplishments. The people of Lingzhou sighed with emotion and felt rather helpless. Could it be that in the future, they really had to let that useless crown prince become their king of Beiliang? Since Li Hanlin was not at home, Su Fengnian did not go to the administrator's residence to disturb official Li, who had been promoted to a second-rank official. There was also Li Fuzhen, who looked at him coldly and disdainfully. It was fine if they did not meet, but if they did meet, it would be even more boring. The Fish Dragon Gang was within Lingzhou and was not far away. However, Su Fengnian did not have the leisure to flaunt his status. There were clearly many travel-worn foreign monks in Beiliang. Most of them could only stay in the various small temples. There were also quite a few who begged with alms bowls. Su Fengnian and his group followed the spacious courier road that led to the capital of Beiliang. They walked slowly and hurriedly. Su Fengnian diverged from the courier road on the border of the 2 prefectures and stopped his horse at a famous stop-horse temple. There was a rumor on the streets as to why the temple had such a strange name. Back when the Su family entered Beiliang, Su Shao and Princess Consort had stopped their horse at this temple to burn incense. It was not the 1st or 15th day of the month, and it was also noon, which was not a pleasant time. The sun was scorching hot, making it seem that there were more monks than pilgrims. The buildings of Stophorse Temple were sharp and tall, reaching into the clouds. The eaves were scattered, and when the wind blew, one could hear the clanking of iron horses. Before entering the temple, Su Fengnian asked with a smile, "Do you believe in Buddhism?" Su Beiji shook his head and said, "The monks in the temple are mostly infatuated men and women who boast that they have seen through the world of mortals. They are far from seeing through. This is especially true for this kind of large temple where the incense is at its peak. There are very few truly virtuous senior monks. I don't believe in Buddhism, but I don't believe in Buddhism either. I remember the Middle Agama Sutra said that there was a venerable one who had not seen a woman for 80 years. I have also been to the Buddha cave outside Dunhuang and saw many pictures of Buddhas cutting their flesh to feed tigers and sacrificing their lives to feed eagles. To me, it is really an unattainable realm. I have also been to the Daoist temple outside the Heaven's Gate of Daoist sect to read the scriptures, but I did not feel too emotional. My grandfather said that old monks talk about Buddhism with their mouths full of alcohol, young prostitutes earn money to buy the yellow quart, and children secretly apply rouge on their faces. This kind of freedom is precious. Among the three religions, Confucianism is relatively less restrictive, so I think it suits me more." Su Fengnian smiled and said, "Then are you going in to burn incense?" Su Beiji said calmly, "It won't stop me from burning incense and praying to Buddha." After entering, Su Beiji distanced himself from Su Fengnian and the others. He held incense and prayed in all directions alone. When he lowered his head, the scholar's face was slightly sad. Chapter 660. Bodhisattvas fear the cause, while laymen fear the effect. Leaving the temple, Su Fengnian saw dozens of pilgrims gathered and whispered to each other. He didn't want to pay attention to them, but Blue Bird tugged on his sleeve and he saw a familiar slender figure beside a roadside tea stall. Beside her stood a tall and slender figure. It was a scholar in a green robe, but he couldn't see his face clearly. It was said that the Taming Horse Temple's prayer for marriage was very effective. Most of the people who came here were young men and women who were not married. During the spring season, it was even more noisy and filled with incense. Su Fengnian only paused for a moment. He learned from the pilgrims that when the scholar was buying water, he handed a book to an old man. He said that the young man had a good physique and wanted to sell it to him for 3 taels of silver at a low price. Originally, this kind of local idle scoundrels were good at blackmailing people. They hired an old man and half swindled him for money. As long as they gave him a few copper coins, they would be able to get away with it. Those scoundrels didn't dare to make a big fuss and their appetites were small. It was estimated that the scholar was noble and had a proud and unyielding character. Not only did he say something that made the scoundrels embarrassed, but he also said something like reporting it to the authorities. He also threw the book on the ground, which angered a group of local bullies who were waiting to collect money. They all rushed forward and rolled up their sleeves, ready to beat him. At this time, in Su Fengnian's eyes, it was already the most exciting part of the show. When the scoundrels saw a beautiful girl beside the young scholar, their mouths were dirty. That scholar was indeed unyielding and unyielding. Everyone said that scholars were useless, but this handsome scholar took the initiative to attack. He directly punched a strong man on the nose. What followed was a disaster. He was punched and kicked by more than a dozen people. If the girl didn't lie on the ground to protect him, he would have to lie in bed for a few days before he could walk. Perhaps they were afraid of provoking the authorities, but after the scoundrels had a good time beating him, they scattered like birds and beasts. Su Fengnian had seen enough and dismissed it with a laugh. He said softly, "Let's go." Su Beiji frowned and said, "This group of idle scoundrels is so unscrupulous?" Su Fengnian held back his laughter and said, "How can idle scoundrels be good people? If you don't bully the weak and fear the strong, if you don't bully men and seize women, are you still a ruffian? But you really can't see it?" Su Beiji understood immediately and said self-deprecatingly, "Understood." After the scoundrels who were looking for money, they didn't take the opportunity to grope the girl. It's against all common sense. This was a trap set and scoundrels, together, After Su Fengnian mounted the horse, he said, "I got tired of this trick when I was 13 or 14 years old." She remembered that at first, she was fooling around with a popular courtesan in Liangzhou. However, she saw through it at a glance. She just didn't say anything. Naturally, I'm not like this girl from a respectable family, crying her heart out and wishing she could give herself to him. Su Beiji shook his head helplessly. Su Fengnian said calmly, "But you can't not believe it. That girl is the daughter of Baoyang's administrator, Li Gongda. That scholar made a big profit this time. He didn't spend more than 10 taels of silver, but it's more useful than writing 300 famous poems." Su Beiji turned his head to look at the girl who was helping the scholar up. She looked like a weeping beauty. Su Beiji laughed softly and said, "You're not going to expose it? Aren't you familiar with Li Hanlin? You've known her for many years." Su Fengnian said self-deprecatingly, "That would be a loss of virtue. In front of Bodhisattva, I'd break up a pair of well-matched scholars and beauties." Su Beiji urged his horse to Bluebird's side and asked for a few banknotes. Bluebird saw that her young master only had a curious expression and didn't intend to refuse. She handed over a stack of banknotes to Su Beiji. Su Beiji galloped away and stopped the group of scoundrels in the distance. He gave them the banknotes and said a few words. Then the scholar really received a solid beating. Su Fengnian rode side by side with Su Beiji. He asked, "What did you say?" Su Beiji laughed and said, "I said I'm Li Hanlin's helper. Li Degongzi has long disliked that kid, so he asked me to come forward and ask you heroes to help." Su Fengnian nodded and said, "This explanation is really watertight." The scoundrels fought without any fear of repercussions. Even if that scholar had relied on the Li family's chicken and dog to rise to the heavens as an official, when he found out about this story, he still did not dare to cry out for injustice. He had forked out money to hire someone to beat him up. It was too sullen. "Are you being mean?" Bluebird smiled knowingly. Su Beiji said calmly, "Since ancient times, scholars have been the best at killing scholars." After galloping out for a moment, Su Beiji suddenly felt somewhat regretful. He asked, "We gave them more than 300 taels of silver. Isn't that too much?" Su Fengnian laughed aloud and pointed his horsewhip at this scholar whose belly full of evil tricks was far better than the other fellow. He was starting to really admire Su Beiji. ###first. I don't understand. Is there such a thing as number one? The monthly votes are within the rules. Everyone can fight for it. I don't have any objections. Whether you win or lose, it's your own ability. However, is it difficult for an author to quietly write a book and for readers to quietly read a book? Who's more hardcore? Who's more loyal? Who's more loyal? Who's more ferocious? You even King said you prepared 1 million? Others are fighting for monthly votes with you. Are they just shining your shoes? The little fish in the pond? You should be happy in your own group. Why do you have to make such a fuss? Fine, I'll fight for number 1. P.S. Let's talk about this month's update. 5,000 words per day for this month. Take 1 day off every week. Chapter 661. The autumn wind was chilly, and the green ant wine was in high demand. The willows at the intersection of the 2 relay roads outside the city were particularly thick and strong. Under the shade of the willows was a clean wine shop. The wine seller was an old man in his 50s. As business was getting better, he let his son and grandson, who were busy farming, come here to help with the business. Originally, it was more suitable for the daughter-in-law to do the odd jobs. After all, only a woman could put her face down and bargain with the customers. The old man was a simple man. After doing business for more than 10 years, he was still shy and could not open his mouth. However, a few years ago, his daughter-in-law had caused a disaster by offending a group of drunken and troublemakers. The old man did not dare to let her suffer. Even now, he still had lingering fears. At that time, if it were not for someone passing by the wine shop who could not stand the sight of those dandy young men in bright armor, he would not only have to pay to avert the disaster, but also his daughter-in-law's chastity. Even now, when he thought about it, the old man still felt guilty and uneasy. He felt that he was useless. Later on, When he heard that those young men who relied on their connections to join the army were probably the personal guards of the Crown Prince of Bailiang, the old man accepted his fate. However, it was a pity that the great general was like a tiger father and a dog son. When he was drunk in private, he would curse a few words about the ways of the world. He thought that when the great general passed away one day, he must not let the crown prince be the king of Bailiang. Everyone said that General Chen Zhibao was invincible on the battlefield, but he was kind to the soldiers and the people. The old man and some of the old farmers in the neighborhood who were about the same age also thought that General Chen was good at fighting and would not be bad if he became the king of Bailiang in the future. Today, the old man was in a good mood and took out the homemade green ant wine that he could not bear to drink. Green ant wine was not expensive to begin with. High officials and dignitaries could afford to drink it, and the common people also did not lack the money to buy it. Only black market merchants who were blinded by greed would drink it. However, there were also good and bad green ant wine. Generally, it was sold in bulk by the caddy and by the bowl. Although the old man was kind, he was not willing to lose money and take out the mellow-aged wine. The main reason was that the old rich man who was sitting there drinking wine was his benefactor. That year, if it was not for this old man who stopped that group of lawless soldiers, his daughter-in-law would have been dragged to the barracks by those bastards. Today's jar of green ant is free of charge. In the old man's opinion, elder brother Su, who was drinking, couldn't be a rich gentleman. He was dark and skinny. He probably worked hard to earn money. However, he was dressed well. At least his clothes looked like silk and satin. It was comfortable to look at. After dealing with a table full of customers, the old man finally had some free time. He draped a wet towel over his shoulder and sat at the table next to him. He smiled and said, "Brother Su, why don't you call nephew Yuan over for a drink? I haven't seen you guys for 2 years. What's wrong? Are you afraid that I'll go bankrupt from drinking?" A tall man with a dignified appearance stood at the edge of the shade. The old man remembered clearly that he was the one who had taught those little bastards a lesson. Later, he learned that he was old brother Su's adopted son, surnamed Yuan. The old man had been selling wine here for many years. He had seen many children of rich families come and go, but none of them could compare to this young master Yuan. Old brother Su had such a good character and appearance as his adopted son. Good people are rewarded. However, today was different from the few times they had met before. Old brother Su had brought a pair of people with him. One was a young scholar, and the other was a well-behaved little girl. It was strange that young Master Yuan wasn't sitting at the table to drink. Could it be that the scholar was old brother Su's biological son and granddaughter? They didn't look alike. However, the old man wasn't a gossipy woman. He didn't mention this. The rich man waved his hand and smiled. He doesn't like to drink and is arrogant. Even if I personally persuade him to drink, he will say that excessive drinking will make things worse. His reasoning is always better than mine. I can't win against him. Brother Huang, let's just let him be. Old Huang smiled and nodded. It's fine, it's fine. Not drinking is better than drinking. Unlike young Master Yuan, my son isn't cut out for great things. He always sneakily drinks a few mouthfuls when I'm not paying attention. I'm too lazy to scold him. We're already so old. We've thought things through. The old man with the surname Su drank a mouthful of green ant wine. He took a deep breath and snorted. With a face full of joy, he said, "Brother, your words are very straightforward." The old man was happy. He laughed and said, "What do you mean by straightforward? It's all nonsense. We don't know any reasoning. We're just living our lives. My grandson went to a private school to learn how to read. I'm just waiting for him to change the word, wine, on the brochure. It doesn't matter if it looks good or not. It's fine as long as he can recognize it." The old man thought for a moment and said, "My son's handwriting is quite good. Why don't we use it first and change it when your grandson learns how to write couplets?" Old Huang was stunned. He rubbed his hands and said with an embarrassed expression, "That's good. But won't it be too troublesome for you?" The old man waved his hand and smiled comfortably. "It's fine. I'm here today to wait for my son to come home. When he finishes drinking, won't it be easy? It's just that I don't have a pen and ink." Old Huang slapped his thigh and said, "If you don't have it, then go get it. The village isn't far." It's 2 miles away. I'll get my grandson to go get it. That brat's legs are very nimble. There was a child who had been in the private school for less than 2 years who had been happily squatting nearby. He rested his chin on his hand and peeked at the little girl sitting at the table. He felt that she was really beautiful. When he heard his grandfather praising his legs in front of everyone, he felt very proud and smiled. Without his grandfather's instructions, he stood up and disappeared. Old Huang generously took the bowl of wine that Brother Su handed over. He took a sip and asked with a smile, "Brother, is your son a scholar who wants to take the imperial examinations?" The old man shook his head and said, "He's not very educated. However, I've been forcing him to go out for the past few years. He travels very far and doesn't stay at home for many days. Sometimes I regret it." The old man sighed and said, "Brother Su, young people should go out and experience more. Otherwise, they won't be able to support a family. Brother, your family business is definitely not small. Unlike us who only have 1 mu of land our whole lives, young Master Su will definitely have to suffer more. It's a good thing." The scholar who didn't drink much smiled and raised his head to look at the end of the posthouse road. Old Huang only drank half a bowl of wine before he went to greet the other tables of customers. The tavern was a small business with a small profit margin. It was rare to have a repeat customer, so all of them were unfamiliar faces. The table of scholars didn't have loud voices, but it sounded like they were talking about the world. Old Huang couldn't understand them anyway. The table of people who had been in the Jianghu were mostly dressed in simple clothes. Among them, there was one who was dressed in brocade clothes and had a loud voice. He spoke with a foreign accent, but he was relatively generous. Other than 2 jars of green ant wine, he also ordered a few caddies of cooked beef. The tables of people didn't interfere with each other's business. The scholar talked loudly and arrogantly. Chapter 662. On the other hand, the group of Jianghu people took a few more glances at young Master Yuan, who was standing like a spear by the side of the posthouse. There was some fear in their eyes. They knew their own weight. They had come to Beiliang to make a living. They wanted to open an escort agency near Liangzhou, or join a slightly larger gang. They had traveled a long way. They had left their hometown in Liaodong because they had been bitten black and blue by a mad dog who also had the surname Yuan. Their original gang had been strangled by that brat, so they definitely had some tricks up their sleeves. They were definitely not those so-called invincible fighters who fought all the way from the village head to the village head, from the east to the village head, and from the east to the village head. They were also not boxing masters who dared to call themselves grandmasters. The reason they had chosen Beiliang as a place to stay was because they knew that the king of Beiliang had brought prosperity to Liaodong. Although Beiliang had suppressed Jianghu quite a bit, at least there was some incense burning there. Furthermore, they were just a few small fish and a few small shrimps. They had not done anything against the country's laws, so it should not be difficult for them to make a living. However, since they were unfamiliar with the place, they had to be careful. They were more cautious, afraid that they would encounter an unreasonable territorial snake. They had heard about young Master Yuan from the conversation between the old man in the wine shop and the rich man. The reason they spoke loudly and deliberately talked about the heroic deeds of wandering Jianghu was because they wanted to see if they could gain the favor of the crippled rich man. It would be best if they could get a guard instructor who could guarantee a steady income. Otherwise, they were embarrassingly short of money and did not have much traveling expenses. They would not put on a facade and ask for a few more caddies of beef. A single copper coin could not kill a hero. How could they dare to rob in the territory under that butcher's jurisdiction? A scholar put down his wine bowl and clicked his tongue. The Longxiang army penetrated deep into the enemy's territory alone and showed the might of the Beiliang army. The great snow dragon cavalry even killed all the way to the northern barbarians' Nanjing prefecture. This is all true, but what does His Royal Highness have to do with this? I've heard that the Crown Prince is very confident. So it turns out that you've been strategizing in a brothel in Liangzhou from thousands of miles away. Impressive, impressive. Another scholar from the same school who had studied the books of the sages shook his head and laughed. It's the same thing. They're both fighting on horseback. His Royal Highness is fighting on horseback when he's on a girl in a brothel. Isn't he fighting on horseback? Yuan Liang, You are underestimating our hereditary His Royal Highness. A scholar with a jade pendant hanging on his waist sneered, I'm waiting for this prince to ride the Empress of Beimeng. That's true ability. When the time comes, I'll be the first to tame him. The scholar who started this said in a strange tone, Is the age difference a little too big? Scholar Xuanyu asked, Isn't His Royal Highness famous for being unrestrained? The table of scholars who were worried about the country and the people burst into laughter. Young Master Yuan, who was standing quietly in the distance, narrowed his eyes. Instantly, a strong murderous aura exploded from his body. Among the 3 old and young people at the next table, the little girl who knew how to be grateful looked indignant. There were tears in her eyes. The old tycoon drank a mouthful of wine and smiled. Qin Shiliang, the scholar from Jiangnan, also smiled gently. The scholar at the other table, who was wearing the most luxurious clothing, put down his wine bowl heavily. He didn't point at anyone and laughed. I've heard that the Crown Prince of Bailiang went to martial Emperor City and even went to the top of the city wall. Later on, he followed the old god of swords and killed his way to the king of Guangling by the Guangling River. I admit that I can't do it even if I have 100 guts. If it were someone else, let alone doing it, they would be so scared that they peed in their pants. Don't talk to me about having an expert protecting you. At this level of grudge, it doesn't matter if you're the crown prince or not. I don't believe that a crown prince who only knows how to bully women can make a sword immortal like Li Chungang escort him for thousands of miles. Can he make the second in the world, martial Emperor City, let him go to the top of the city wall and walk out of the city? His friend tugged at his sleeve and shook his head slightly, indicating to his brother not to let his emotions affect his decisions. Scholar Pendant Jade had a calm expression and said slowly, Is a boorish man worthy to talk about the world's affairs? A toad opens its mouth to the sky and swallows the sun and the moon? You sure talk big. When arguing with someone, how could the people of Jianghu win against a scholar? That person of Jianghu in embroidered clothes was probably an impatient boorish man. When he heard such sarcastic remarks, he grabbed a knife on the table and immediately held down the people at the same table. Chen Shiliang finally opened his mouth and smiled. A toad swallowing the sky and the moon is called ambition. Even if it's unpleasant to hear, it's just having high standards. But a frog at the bottom of the well looking at the sky is petty. A scholar shot a glance at this shabby scholar in white clothes and sneered, Who do you think you are? Chen Shiliang said calmly, Let's not talk about me first. Even if you read a few sage books, you're not even a thing. If I were your father, I wouldn't have ridden your mother. What's the use of giving birth to you? The little girl covered her mouth and laughed. She secretly gave brother Chen a thumbs up. Chen Shiliang touched the little girl's head and ignored the scholars who were so angry that their chests almost exploded. The rich man glanced at the people of Jianghu and greeted old Huang with a smile. Come, give these warriors 2 jars of green ant wine and 5 caddies of beef. Put it on my tab. All right, brother Huang, this money can't be less. The people at the table were not pretentious and cupped their fists to thank him. Dust flew on the road to the inn. The old man stood up and put his hands into his sleeves. He gently looked at his son who went all the way to the north and cut off Su Huainan's head and the 5th raccoon's head. Su Fengyan turned over and got off the horse. White Bear Yuan Zuozong smiled and walked forward to take the reins of the horse. Su Fengyan smiled and thanked him. He said, I'll drink a bowl of wine with second brother Yuan later. Yuan Zuozong nodded. The old man rubbed the head of his second son, Huang Man, and then walked to the table with his eldest son. He said softly, You've become darker. Su Fengyan nodded. After the father and son sat down, the little girl sensibly moved to Qin Shiliang's bench. She greeted the brother who had once picked up the wishing money for her and gave her a big watermelon. She shyly called young Master Su. The latter reached out and pinched her nose. He smiled and said, Now you're much fairer than me. In the future, there will be a lot of handsome young masters lining up to admire you. At the table, the old man sat alone on a bench. Qin Shiliang and the little girl sat on another. Su Fengyan and Su Longxiang sat together. Su Beiji sat on the last bench. Yuan Zuozong stood and drank a bowl of wine. He stood back to his original position. Su Shao asked with a smile, "Oh right, I boasted to the tavern's owner, Brother Huang, that your handwriting is not bad. I want you to write the word, wine, so that I can hang it on a pole to attract customers. Is that okay?" Su Fengnian drank a bowl of wine and wiped the corner of his mouth. "It's okay." The little boy hurriedly brought a brush, ink, and a small piece of satin that was carefully stored at home. Su Fengnian raised his arm and wrote. But he wrote very slowly and neatly. Old Huang was naturally satisfied and thanked him repeatedly. When Su Fengnian returned the brush and ink, he stood up and said with a smile, "No need, no need." He even joked that his father must have come here many times to cheat wine. It was just a small matter. After a moment of silence, Su Xiao wanted to say something but stopped. Su Fengnian lowered his head and drank. His lips touched the edge of the bowl. He slightly raised his head and said, "I already know." Su Xiao nodded. Su Fengnian asked softly, "Are the troops ready?" Su Xiao smiled. Su Fengnian tightly pursed his lips. "I won't enter the city first. I'll go later." Su Xiao sighed in his heart. Su Fengnian drank another bowl of wine and gently stood up. Su Xiao raised his arm to Yuan's Wuzong. Su Beiji bowed deeply to the old man before sitting down. While sitting down and drinking, he and Chen Shiliang looked at each other almost at the same time. They looked at each other but quickly moved away. Su Fengnian mounted the horse and galloped to the northwest. There were 800 white horses of the Phoenix Battalion ahead. They were going to kill Prince Zhao Kai. Su Xiao sat down and drank. Old Huang came closer and joked, "Young Master Su is really handsome. You don't look like old brother Su at all." Su Xiao asked Old Huang to sit down and laughed. "It's good that he doesn't look like me. If he looks like me, it will be difficult to find a wife. He looks like his mother. What a blessing." The old wine seller had a deep expression on his face. Su Xiao stood up to pay the bill. After much persuasion, he finally handed it to the old man. Before he left, he said, "Those people who caused trouble here back then were not from the Feng Battalion. I have to tell you about this, brother." Old Huang smiled. "It doesn't matter. We can't afford to offend anyone. We just want to be safe." Su Xiao said softly, "I don't know if I'll have a chance to drink here again." Old Huang said anxiously, "You're treating me like an outsider. Brother, you have a few jars of green ant wine." Su Xiao patted Old Huang's shoulder and left the wine shop. Old Huang stood at the edge of the wine shop and suddenly realized something. He turned to his son and shouted, "That word, replace the old one and hang the new one." Chapter 663. Everyone in Bailiang knew that there was a group of elite light cavalry outside the capital city. Most of them were sons of rich families, and some of them were descendants of generals. Their father's generation didn't have a high position, and their numbers were always maintained at around 800. Due to the lack of a leader and the restriction of rules, this cavalry rarely showed themselves. Only last year did they choose 5 people from each of the 20 bids to make a total of 100 cavalry. Then, they carried back the bodies of more than a dozen of their comrades who died in battle and brought back many boxes of martial arts manuals from a place called Mount Huey's Bulgang. The outside world didn't pay much attention to them. His Highness had done a lot of ridiculous things over the years, wasn't it? What could a mere 800 cavalry do? Wang Chong had once asked Lieutenant Yuan Meng this question in private. Yuan Meng told him that when Chu Lushan's General Chu led his troops to Shu, he only had 2,000 to 3,000 men. Even so, he was still able to crush western Shu, which was surrounded by natural barriers. Cavalry Wang Chong's good brother, Lin Heng, died in the Battle of Xiangfan City's Reed Marsh. He was pierced through by Wang Mingyin's halberd. When they were crossing the gates of hell, they were on duty together. Lin Heng saw that person sitting at the bow of the ship and flicking his saber with his fingers. Lin Heng even said that the person wasn't just for show. Although Wang Chong's martial arts weren't as good as Lin Heng, who always said that his saber skills would be better than Gu Jintong's, he didn't believe it at the time. Later, outside Xiangfan City, he was killed by Wang Mingyin, one of the few experts in the martial arts world. After seeing that person draw his saber, Wang Chong finally believed it. However, Lin Heng died. But Wang Chong didn't hate that person. Because that day, when they faced off against King of Jing and's 1,000 cavalry, that person took the lead and lightly stabbed a fierce general of the Qingzhou army to death. After that person gave the order to withdraw his saber, he didn't say anything to calm the soldiers down. He just personally bandaged Wang Chong's wound. Wang Chong wasn't a rash person. The reason why he entered the Phoenix Battalion was because his father, who had been a lieutenant in Chengdu, said that there would be a day when he could earn merits with a clear conscience. Wang Chong naturally didn't feel that he was going to throw his life away. Is my life not a life? Why should he work for you? My father isn't that bad either. After he came down from the Bailiang army, he was at least the head of a county's army. But after that trip to the pugilistic world, not to mention Wang Chong, even a ruffian like Wang Lin had changed after returning to Bailiang. If anyone in the Phoenix Battalion said anything bad about that person, Wang Lin didn't waste his breath. He went to the training ground and had a horse battle. He won 3 battles in a row. In the 4th battle, he used a wooden spear to poke someone off his horse. He made that person sit high on the horse and pointed the tip of the spear at his chest. Before Wang Lin could open his mouth, the other lieutenant, Hong Shuwen, who had traveled the pugilistic world with him, flipped over and got on his horse. He then poked that person off his horse and asked him if he was convinced. Hong Shuwen was one of the most ruthless people in the Phoenix Battalion. He was outstanding in both horse and infantry battles. Even Field Officer Yuan said that this kid was a dog that didn't bark. When he bit someone, he didn't know how to hold back. Very quickly, no one in the Phoenix Battalion dared to speak ill of this young man who had never stepped into the military camp. It wasn't that they didn't want to say anything, but they didn't dare to. Damn it, Hong Shuwen had fought with a few people in private. Field Officer Yuan always said that he would punish him, but after the fight, he didn't say anything. There were even people who saw Field Officer Yuan giving special treatment to Hong Shuwen, teaching him a few spear techniques. Everyone finally understood that Field Officer Yuan had also switched sides with that fellow. Moreover, after that incident, the famous Great Halberd Ning Mei of the Bailiang army would occasionally visit the Phoenix Battalion's encampment to look for Wang Chong and Wang Donglin's cavalry. During this time, he even took in 2 anonymous disciples. Although they didn't officially acknowledge each other as disciples, it was close enough. He taught them how to throw the short halberd. When he was free, he even took out money to treat these nameless soldiers who didn't have any military achievements to drink. This made others very envious. After all, Ning Mei wasn't an ordinary character. He was one of the 4 fangs of Bailiang. He was on the same level as Dian Xiongzhu, a first-rate general who commanded 6,000 Iron Stupa cavalry. Although the hearts of the 800 people in the Phoenix Battalion were currently scattered, everyone was worthy of the Bailiang saber at their waist. In terms of individual strength, they definitely wouldn't lose to any of the elite troops in Bailiang. Especially for a bastard like Hong Shuwen who fought as if he was eating. He should have become an elite crossbowman long ago. The 800 light cavalry held their breaths and waited quietly for the arrival of that person. They only knew that they were about to embark on a long-distance raid. They didn't know who to kill. They didn't know how many soldiers the enemy had. They didn't know if they would survive after the battle. Su Xiao sat in the carriage. The coachman was Spear Immortal Wang Xiu's junior brother, Han Lao's Han. Chen Shiliang and the little girl followed him into the carriage. Su Beiji was left behind to enter Liangzhou's prefectural city and follow the coachman to the king's residence. He rode on horseback, accompanied by several old retainers whose auras were as long as rivers. The carriage suddenly stopped. Su Beiji suddenly saw the king of Bailiang lift the curtain and wave at him. Su Beiji sat in the carriage. He wasn't trembling with fear, but he still felt all sorts of emotions. The hunchbacked old man in front of him and Huang Sanjia had destroyed the principles of the spring and autumn annals. They were even said to have broken the backs of millions of Confucian scholars. Su Beiji really couldn't imagine that the butcher was an old man who talked and laughed with peddlers. Su Xiao leaned against the wall of the carriage with his hands in his sleeves. He said to the grandson of his old friend, "Don't hold a grudge about Su Huainan's death. Of course, if you really want to hold a grudge, you should hold a grudge against me." Su Beiji knelt on the ground and lowered his head. Su Beiji doesn't dare. Su Xiao smiled. "You don't dare." Chapter 664. Su Beiji's back was immediately drenched in sweat, but his tone didn't change. He kept his gaze down and said slowly, "Since Su Beiji came to Bailiang, he will work for Bailiang wholeheartedly. But if you want me to have no grudges, Su Beiji is not a saint, so it's impossible." Su Xiao nodded and said, "That's true." "Very good." Su Beiji was silent. Su Xiao said softly, "Let's sit down and talk. Speaking of which, we are still distant relatives. You can call me Uncle Su in the future." Su Beiji sat down cross-legged. Su Xiao asked, "This time, Prince Zhao Kai went to the western regions. As expected, the 800 Phoenix barracks will meet him at the throat between Jianghe and Lusha River. Besides a powerful Dharma king of the esoteric sect, Zhao Kai also has 200 elite Yulin cavalry and 16 imperial golden saber guards. As for the secret forces, Bailiang's spies didn't find out much. Do you think this assassination is worth it? Even if it succeeds, what are the pros and cons?" Su Beiji asked calmly, "May I ask how many soldiers in Jianghe have rebelled?" Su Xiao frowned and said softly, "Rebelling?" The old man smiled and said, "Let's do as you say. Jianghe has been a top strategic town since ancient times. Its importance can be ranked in the top 10 in the entire Liang dynasty. It has a total of 16,000 soldiers, half of which are infantry and half of which are cavalry. The 8,000 infantry are mostly former subordinates of Gu Jiantang, but there are also some subordinates of King Yan. As for the cavalry, there are 3,000 of them. They are just west of Jianghe, killing a group of bandits." Su Beiji continued to ask, "How many of the remaining 5,000 can come out in an emergency?" Su Xiao said, "More than half, still 3,000 soldiers. However, the prerequisite was that they had Gu Jiantang's tiger seal, which was the Minister of War's tiger seal. Unfortunately, I have some old subordinates on the way to the Sword Pavilion. They're old, and they might not be able to deliver military intelligence quickly." Su Beiji shook his head and said, "I dare say that it is not these 3,000 soldiers who will make a move, but the other 2,000. Because even if Gu Jiantang is willing to issue this order, there will be a woman in the imperial palace in the capital who will stop it." Su Xiao frowned. "Oh, who would have the courage to do that?" Su Beiji said indifferently, "The son of the Zhao family, to be more precise, is Han Diaosi, who wholeheartedly wants to help Zhao Kai become the emperor. It was very likely that this eunuch, who seemed to be losing his power in the inner palace, would personally come to the capital. Moreover, Han Diaosi's actions would mean that he is truly going downhill from the imperial palace. After all, it is a taboo for the imperial family for a eunuch to participate in the struggle for the throne. Moreover, the current emperor is not a muddle-headed emperor. No matter how great the friendship he has with a personal eunuch before he sits on the throne, he can't afford to squander it like this. Even if the son of the Zhao family really wants to let Zhao Kai succeed the throne, Han Diaosi will have to give up his position." Su Xiao nodded. "That makes sense." Chen Liangxi, who had been holding the little girl, looked down at her and smiled knowingly. She didn't know why Brother Chen was smiling, but she smiled at him out of habit. Su Beiji sighed from the bottom of his heart. Even if the heir is determined to kill off Zhao Kai and the 200 imperial guards, I'm afraid it will be a battle of backups, like the mantis stalking the cicada. Su Xiao suddenly laughed loudly and pointed at Qin Shiliang. Then he said to Su Beiji, "You too, great minds think alike, but there are still some small differences." Su Beiji didn't look at Qin Shiliang. Chen Shiliang also didn't raise his head to look at Su Beiji. One was the grandson of the king of the northern courtyard, Su Huainan, who had high hopes for him. The other was a poor scholar who didn't even have the qualifications to be seated at the Baogua Temple's winding water-flowing goblet. Just like a woman from a wealthy family, even if she has the appearance of an ordinary person, she has the bearing of a great family. She needs to be carefully sculpted and removed from her arrogance. Only then can she slowly see her heavenly fragrance and national beauty and gradually enter the best state. Just like a beauty from a poor family, although extremely beautiful and moving in the end, she lacks the natural bearing of wealth. She needs to be given an aura from the big picture and open up the layout. Only then can she be as round as she wishes, charming but not demonic. On the top floor of the Tide Listening Pavilion was a writing table. There was a piece of fine paper on which a scholar had written a few comments from Su Beiji and Chen Shiliang before his death. Su Xiao said softly, "You two are much luckier to meet Feng Yan than those scholars who met me." Su Xiao laughed softly. "In the future, I'll have to trouble you two in Baoyang. It's already difficult to establish a business and preserve one's achievements. If you really want to rely on those who preserve their achievements to fight for a new country, it'll be even more difficult." The two of them were both stunned and frightened. A rare hint of loneliness appeared in Su Xiao's eyes. "After entering the city, you two should first go to Feng Yan's grave to toast someone. He valued the two of you greatly when he was alive. Don't disappoint him. This person is called Li Yishan." A group of cavalrymen arrived with a rumble on a remote path that didn't belong to the post house. Yuan Meng suddenly opened his eyes wide, his gaze instantly burning. This general who had been mocked by his colleagues all year round was even trembling as he held his spear. The leader of the cavalrymen was an extremely distinguished young master. However, on his handsome face, which should have been frivolous, there was a solemn and heroic air that even the 800 white horses would find unfamiliar. There was a short knife at his waist on his left hand and a long sword on his right. The second cavalryman was the black-clothed and barefoot butcher's second son. Who in Beimang and Liang didn't know about the Longxiang army? Who didn't know about the enemy of 10,000, Su Longxiang? The third cavalryman was the white bear Yuan Zuozong, who was known as one of the top 3 in the Liang dynasty's army. This unparalleled valiant general known throughout the world during the battle at the tomb of a concubine of West Chu only carried a Baoyang knife, which was enough. The fourth cavalryman was a woman in green with a long spear in her hand. The fifth cavalryman was a woman whose arms were hidden in the big sleeves of a red robe and a red scarf on her head. Her face couldn't be seen clearly, but her demonic aura was eerie. Her aura didn't lose to Yuan Zuozong at all. The 5 cavalrymen passed by the Phoenix Battalion in succession. Yuan Meng was the first to turn his horse around. The rest of the cavalrymen were silent and followed closely behind. Chapter 665. In the cold and cheerless imperial palace, after the autumn rain, the autumn wind brushed the autumn leaves. The newest imperial concubine, Yan Dongwu, sat under a parasol tree and told her mother-in-law some interesting anecdotes from the streets. Nothing was taboo. The relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law was harmonious, far beyond what people outside the palace could imagine. This talented woman of northern Liang, who was only slightly overshadowed by Su Weisheng, smiled as she spoke of the matter of writing a poem on a red leaf. That gentle, courteous, and thrifty, scholarly prince immediately picked up a piece of wutong leaf that had just drifted down and didn't have time to sweep it away. He stood up with a serious expression and bowed with his hands clasped in front of his chest. "Wife, please write a poem for me." Empress Zhao Ji, who was sitting to the side, was wearing a phoenix coronet. Although her appearance was average, she was extremely dignified and elegant. She was deeply respected by the emperor. For so many years, they had treated each other with respect. In addition to working diligently, the emperor of the Zhao family would occasionally personally draw her eyebrows when he was in the mood. As for Zhao Ji's method of managing the harem with both strength and gentleness, it really made all the favored concubines' hair stand on end. Not long ago, there was a concubine who was banished to the cold palace. She washed her face with tears every day in the Changchun Palace and secretly spent 300 taels of gold to buy an extremely sentimental poem. In the end, it was the empress who personally delivered it to the emperor. Zhao Ji looked at the small squabbles between the princes and imperial concubines, and the corners of her mouth turned up slightly. She glared at her son, who was seen as the one with the least ancestral spirit among all the princes. She was imposing without being angry, but her tone slightly revealed the secret of heaven. "You are not proper. You are much less talented than your own wife. You also do not know how to improve." The prince, who was famous in the capital for his elegance, said helplessly, "A woman's virtue is to have no talent. Mother, you should teach Dongwu a lesson. She is full of talent. She is more than qualified to be the chancellor of the Imperial College or the Dehuang sect." Yan Dongwu copied Zhao Ji and glared at her husband, who spoke without thinking and pinched him under the table. Zhao Ji reached out and slapped her son's forehead. "Are you scolding me indirectly? Or are you scolding me and Dong Yuwu together?" When the prince smiled, his handsome face would be filled with a heartwarming warmth. It was very warm and intoxicating. Such an elegant man, born in a royal family, could make the noble ladies in the capital go crazy for him. Back then, he married the Bailiang girl, Yan Dongwu, who happened to be the daughter of a Bailiang civil official. It really made the entire capital feel incredulous. However, reality proved that the two of them were a perfect match. Yan Dongwu had appeared at the palace banquets several times, and no one could find any fault with him. This made many old foxes who had lived in the capital for a long time feel gratified. The prince held Yan Dongwu's cold hands and faced Empress Zhao Ji. He smiled and said, "I have scolded both of you. Both of you are very talented. You are also a good-for-nothing who brought shame to my mother. You are the two women I love the most in the world. I love my mother more when I am with my mother. When I am at home, I love my wife more." Zhao Ji joked, "If Fengya heard this, let's see how you deal with it." The prince sighed sadly. "This stupid girl. I have been worried for nothing for 20 years. These years, she has come to find you more often than I have." Zhao Ji said calmly, "When she gets married and suffers some hardship, she will know who really cares for her." The prince shook his head and said, "I can't bear for her to suffer. It hurts so much." Zhao Ji smiled again. "Your wife is still here. You don't need to think before you speak. How can you love your sister for a lifetime? Besides, it is useless to rely on your love." Yan Dongwu said softly, "Princess Sui Zhu's personality is really good." Zhao Ji nodded. The prince reached out and held a yellow leaf. He sighed, "It is so cold in autumn." Thunder rumbled in the gloomy sky without warning. The prince frowned and said, "It sounds like winter thunder." Zhao Ji, who liked the clean scene in her field of vision, gently brushed away a leaf that had just left the branch on the table. She raised her head and squinted at the west. The prince listened to the thunder and smiled as he quietly threw away the autumn leaf in his hand. After Su Shao granted him the title of king, Gu Jiantang, who destroyed the spring and autumn kingdoms, took charge of the Ministry of War with the rank of first-rank general. He was one rank higher than the other 5 ministers and became the nominal head of the military in the Liang dynasty. Apart from the 6 vassal kings, in the imperial court, only Grand Secretary Zhang Julu and the leader of the remnants, Sun Shiji, were on par with him. Last year, he rushed to the northern border of the empire to personally take charge of all border matters and rarely participated in court meetings. However, no one dared to write a memorial to remove the title of Minister of War because they empathized with Great General Gu's hard work. The Ministry of War was still the watertight general's camp of the Gu party. As a first-class important minister of the border, as well as the leader of Gu's party, apart from his previous night duty in the palace, Gu Jiantang almost never had any private contact with Zhang Julu. When he returned to the capital this time, he made an unprecedented visit to Grand Secretary Zhang's residence, doing so openly, not caring if the emperor suspected that the civil and military officials were of the same mind, or if the other officials in the capital were in cahoots with each other. This type of official taboo that the powerful ministers of previous dynasties feared like a tiger, on Gu Jiantang's side, it became a trivial matter. The great general came out in casual clothes, even bringing along the newly appointed guerrilla officer Yuan Tingshan, who might be his adopted son or son-in-law. On the same street, there were many pairs of eyes staring fixedly from behind the doors of most of the important ministers' residences. When Minister Gu walked out of the blue-eyed Grand Secretary Zhang's residence in large strides, they quickly reported to their masters who were waiting for news. No more, no less, exactly an hour. It wasn't even enough time to drink 2 pots of tea. What kind of important military and state matters could be discussed? After entering the mansion, Yuan Tingshan, who had been wandering around aimlessly, followed the great general into the carriage. He didn't find any clues from this world's #1 bladesman's face. His expression was as indifferent as a white steamed bun, making Yuan Tingshan, who wished for nothing more than a heavenly thunder and earthly fire fight, feel extremely regretful. Yuan Tingshan had an impatient temperament where he couldn't sit still for even half a moment. The silent carriage made him pass his days and years. As soon as they drove out of a street where every door had a dynasty's great bodhisattva sitting inside, he couldn't help but ask, "Great General, what is going on?" Gu Jiantang didn't pay him any attention. Chapter 666. Yuan Tingshan normally acted like he was number one under the heavens in front of everyone, but in front of Great General Gu he was a bit better, not daring to act rashly. After all, deep down, he still sincerely admired this future father-in-law who had both military achievements and martial strength, yet was powerless. Originally, the one he worshipped the most was that king with a different surname, the butcher Su Shao. Later on, in Gangnam-do, he tried to assassinate the widow Su Shao, but was seriously injured by that young immortal who could sever fate with a sword. He felt like there was no longer any good karma between him and Su Shao in this life, so he turned his attention to Gu Jiantang. Yuan Tingshan could only mutter, "If you don't want to say it, then don't say it. I don't feel like guessing." Gu Jiantang calmly said, "You don't need to worry about the northern Jianghu, I will send you to Ji province." Yuan Tingshan's brows furrowed tightly. Ji province? The old nest of the valiant martyr Han family? I heard they were executed for the sake of Grand Secretary Zhang's prestige. Great General, at the time, you also contributed quite a bit, right? Gu Jiantang gave Yuan Tingshan a look out of the corner of his eyes. The latter shrunk his neck, saying quietly, "Either way, there isn't a single official who isn't vicious and merciless. How many people have I killed? Compared to you all, it's nothing." Gu Jiantang's tone didn't fluctuate at all. "When you arrive at Ji province, you don't need to report to me when you kill people. When you arrive at the imperial court, I will help you stop the impeachment." Yuan Tingshan was pleasantly surprised. "Really?" Gu Jiantang closed his eyes. Yuan Tingshan said with a laugh, "When there is a great battle to fight, you better not let this old one get promoted to a high official, or else when the time comes, Bailiang won't be able to bear the consequences. This old one has a death grudge with that surnamed Su and His Royal Highness." Gu Jiantang closed his eyes, saying with a sneer, "Just based on you?" Yuan Tingshan's hands held the back of his head, leaning against the carriage wall, his expression gloomy. "That day will come. Let's see whose blade can take more lives." Gu Jiantang slowly said, "There might not necessarily be a chance." Yuan Tingshan said in shock, "Great General, what do you mean by these words?" Gu Jiantang put on a fake smile, which made the fearless mad dog Yuan feel a chill run down his spine. "Sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. But this time, those sitting on the mountain will all come down the mountain." As the throat of the dynasty that controlled the West, Jianghe housed a sizable number of war elite troops. They had both infantry and cavalry, and the 8,000 infantry were mostly mountaintop powers from the Spring and Autumn War. Most of them were the old subordinates of General Gu Jiantang, and the King of Yen was slightly fewer. The 8,000 cavalrymen were in a complicated situation where three parties were vying for supremacy. Among them, 3,000 cavalrymen were orphans without parents. The leader, Wang Ji, was a general who rose to his position after the spring and autumn period. He often led 200 to 300 elite cavalrymen into the hinterlands of the western regions to hunt. His hands were so bloody that they were almost black, and he was not very popular among his peers. Currently, he was leading 3,000 cavalrymen to kill a group of highland bandits. Other than that, although the general in charge of the 3,000 cavalrymen was not a member of the Gu party, he was a relatively orthodox member of the Ministry of War. He relied on his connections in the capital to climb up the ranks. He belonged to the foreign faction of the Sword Garret. The remaining 2,000 cavalrymen were born and raised in Sword's Gate. Cavalry General He Yen had always been a fence-sitter, and he had been living a difficult life. He did not have many men under him, and he had such a spineless leader. Although the 2,000 cavalrymen were strong, they could not gain much from him. What was strange was that the various factions of the Sword Garret were intertwined with each other, and these 2,000 cavalrymen were not willing to cross the wall. The Gu party's General Ruan Daicheng was the nominal commander of the Sword Garret. Today, he watched as the 2,000 cavalrymen left the Sword Garret without permission. He had already cursed the 18 generations of He Yan's ancestors in the barracks. He was about to ask his trusted aide to write an impeachment report to the Ministry of War, accusing He Yan of leaving the sword garret for no reason. But when Ruan Daiqing was about to finish the report, he stopped. He Yan was the most cunning and slippery person. Why did he suddenly take the wrong medicine? Earlier, when he had personally gone to intercept them, the 2,000 riders had charged straight out of the city. They had the arrogant attitude of wanting to kill anyone who blocked their way. This made Ruan Daiqing almost think that there was a mutiny and could only avoid them. At the time, he was only glad that he had caught something on them. Now that he thought about it, Ruan Daiqing calmed down and his abacus sank deeper. He picked up the memorial from the desk and slowly burned it with a match. He said to the startled scholar, "Change it to a secret letter. Find a trusted courier and send it 500 miles to the capital. Personally hand it to the minister." At this time, a dusty man with a clean face and no beard broke into the tent. Ruan Daiqing was angry at the incompetence of his guards, but when he saw the man's face, he was surprised and nervous. He was about to say something to please the man, but the eunuch stomped his feet and pointed at Ruan Daiqing's nose and scolded, "Useless thing, why didn't you stop He Yan's 2,000 cavalrymen?" Ruan Daiqing was stunned. He was thinking about how to remedy the situation. The eunuch who served the empress for many years in the palace waved his sleeves and left. He left a sentence that made Ruan Daiqing's legs go weak. "Ruan Daiqing, you'll be kicked out of the sword pavilion. Useless." The baffled Ruan Daiqing stood rooted to the ground. After a long time, he came back to his senses. There was no third person in the tent. This general with real power only dared to curse in his heart, "Son of a bitch, do you have balls?" Outside the sword gate, 2,000 cavalrymen galloped like a flood. In the distance, there was a man with a head full of silver hair. He was wearing a bright red coat because of the gallop. He was extremely arrogant. He had stopped Chao Changqing 3 times in the Liang Palace. Once, the eunuch was only 100 steps away from His Majesty. But he was still stopped by the head of the eunuchs in the world. Previously, when Bai Hu came out of the Bailiang Palace to get married, it even alarmed the king of Bailiang. Su Shao asked with a smile, "She's married already?" Bai Hu said calmly, "Take a breather. I'll be back soon." Su Shao put his hands in his sleeves naturally and asked, "It doesn't count, right?" Bai Hu nodded, "Of course." On this day, Nangong Push, who was known as the most beautiful woman in the world, left Liangzhou and disappeared. Almost at the same time, in the vast western region, a horse was riding slowly. The man in white held a dark purple spear in his hand. The spearhead was not inlaid, making the spear look more like a stick. The name of the spear was Plum Wine. Chapter 667. He rode in the front. The hot wind in the desert blew against his face. The rope on his cloak gradually loosened and then fell into the yellow sand. It revealed a shocking, bright-colored python robe. The eunuch was followed by 2,000 cavalrymen of the sword garret a full mile behind him. There was an iron law in the Liang dynasty that was clearly engraved on the dragon steel. No eunuch was allowed to leave the palace. After the Liang dynasty became peaceful, there were only a few exceptions in the past decade or so. The first time was when Princess Sui Zhu sneaked into Beimang. After the head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate returned to the palace, he died not long after being entangled by his red threads. Another time was when he went to pick up the emperor's illegitimate son Zhao Kai. Even though it was the emperor's order, he still used half of his friendship. Mobilizing the 2,000 cavalrymen behind him that were only loyal to the royal family was still a quiet move by the emperor on the chessboard of the world. He also used half of the remaining friendship between master and servant. But Han Xianxian, the most powerful official whose real name was very unfamiliar in the court, didn't regret it, let alone think about the emperor's fickleness. The human cat Han Xianxian was greedy for power. Otherwise, he would not have held power alone for so many years. However, he knew who he was greedy for. Back then, when the emperor was still the weakest prince, he was willing to die for the emperor. When the emperor sat on the dragon throne and had children, Han Xianxian chose to call him Great Master Zhao Kai from the very beginning. Han Xianxian was the son of that gentle woman. Han Xianxia had eaten a few meals personally cooked by her. He was not the least bit despised by her as a eunuch. The world bullied me, Han Xianxia, once, I will bully you all my life. If she respected me, I'll respect her 1,000 feet. She died early, so Han Xianxia repaid her kindness to Zhao Kai. Han Xianxia was never educated and didn't know many words. He also never cared about national laws or human relationships. The emperor and the prince Zhao Kai were the only rules. Han Daoist only cared about these two family rules in his life. Spurring his horse forward, Han Daoist saw the dense cavalry formation in front of him. The old eunuch, who did not carry any weapons, raised his hands and twirled 2 strands of silver hair hanging down from his temples. His hands were bound by 3,000 red threads. Once he killed all the rebels and traitors that the Bailiang had cultivated, he would be able to hand the job over to He Yen. Han Daoist could have easily killed the head eunuch of the hall directorate who went to the sword garret to stop him from mobilizing his troops. However, the Catman did not have any ill feelings towards the Empress, and he did not want to embarrass his young master in the future. Therefore, he had a falling out with her too early. Thus, he allowed Ruan Daiqing to go to the Sword Firmament Pavilion and look for the good-for-nothing Ruan Daiqing. He charged towards the 3,000-strong cavalry without slowing down, still in the mood to smile and say, "Black monk, don't let our disciples die here. Otherwise, as the great teacher, this old servant will tear you apart even if it means risking my life." Wang Ji, the cavalry general on the opposite side, did not relax even when facing Han Daoist. Not only because he had guessed the identity of the old eunuch, but also because he knew what he was doing. Treason. Wang Ji lowered his head and touched the saber that he had kept for many years. The 3,000 cavalrymen behind him did not recognize Ruan Daiqing, the commander of the sword garret. They had been fighting for many years and had even forgotten about the son of the Zhao family. His father was placed in the sword garret by great General Su as a garrison general. Before his death, he had gathered 1,000 trusted subordinates, and in 10 years, he had gained 2,000 cavalrymen. Among them, 300 were from Bailiang who had slowly infiltrated the sword garret. Most of them were 15 or 16 years old youths. Last year, 80 of them came in one go. In the quicksand of the western regions, 800 miles away from the Sword Gate Pass, Wang Ji saw the human butcher for the first time. Wang Ji knew that it would not be long before he could use his father's treasured saber, the Bailiang saber. Wang Ji tilted his head and spat on the ground, silently pulling out the Bailiang saber. 1,000 cavalrymen retreated abnormally, while 2,000 began to charge. This was an interception that risked countless lives to stop a finger-profound level expert. Wang Ji still wanted to become a famous governor of the border, a great general who could intimidate the Great Desert. If he really died here, he would definitely regret it. But since he was reincarnated and had the same surname as his father who used to be a Bailiang soldier, he had no regrets. The plum wine was in his hand. The man who did not drink took the water pouch from his waist and drank a mouthful. Some people said that he was the best general who could turn something rotten into something magical since the emergence of large-scale cavalry battles. He was invincible in cavalry battles with more than 100,000 soldiers. Even the current emperor praised him as the white-clothed warrior Immortal who could not be compared to all the other officials in the court. In the army of the Liang dynasty, who was the best in martial arts. Originally, most people said that General Gu Jiantang was better. Since he fought 2 battles with Beimang Hong Jingyan and the Ancestor Bronze Man, he had become the new Immortal of spears, vaguely surpassing Gu Jiantang who had extraordinary saber skills. Chen Jibao stopped his horse and turned around. A small group of cavalrymen followed behind. The horses under them were exhausted after a long chase. They saw the leading woman with a sword on her back, covered in dried blood. Chen Jibao's bitter smile flashed across his face. Chapter 668. He turned his horse around and lightly tossed the water skin to her. Unfortunately, she didn't catch it. The two of them were 50 paces apart. Chen Jibao laughed. "You guys don't even consider physical strength. Even 2,000 riders may not be able to stop me." The woman who hadn't slept for 2 days said coldly, "The 600 iron Buddhas that Dian Xiongzong deployed and the 800 crossbowmen sent by Wei Fuqing are all dead. They're really promising. They're all wearing Beimang armor. Chen Zhibao said lightly, "What's the point of killing them? They didn't rebel. They just happened to appear in the western regions." Su Weisheng calmed his breathing. Chen Zhibao wasn't in a hurry to make a move. He still reined in his horse and stopped. The end of his spear pointed at the yellow sand under the horse's hooves. "I didn't expect you to come. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done this." Su Weisheng said sarcastically, "There's a battle that Chen Zhibao didn't expect?" Chen Zhibao said indifferently, "I did, but I didn't want to admit it. I don't know why, but every time I think of a situation that I don't want to happen, it always happens. There's no exception this time." Su Weisheng asked directly, "Are you really going to rebel against Beiliang?" Chen Zhibao tilted his head slightly and asked back, "Who said so?" Su Weisheng didn't want to talk anymore. He gently breathed in and out, the ancient sword on his back trembling. Chen Zhibao still didn't show any signs of lifting his spear. "When I was young, I didn't want my father to die for my adoptive father. In the end, he took 62 Chen family members to bring up the rear without saying anything. He still went. The second time, I didn't want His Royal Highness to refuse to enter the capital to be the prince consort. He didn't go. Last time, I didn't want him to return from Beimang to Beiliang alive. He survived. This time, I didn't want to see you, but you came." Chen Zhibao finally mentioned the plum wine. "All these years, I didn't do anything. I just wanted my foster father to slowly grow old and die in the position of king of Beiliang. Now, I still don't want to be a disloyal and unjust traitor. So, even though I knew that His Royal Highness had gone out 3 times, I still stood by and watched. The last time I didn't want to do anything, it just had to appear again." Chen Zhibao bent down and took out a spearhead from his hanging pouch. He inserted it into the already incomplete plum wine. When he lowered his head, the man in white said slowly, "I know that the maid in Wuningen, Blue Bird, is the daughter of Spear Immortal Wang Xiu. I knew that the instant spear was left in the armory. She was groomed to be a death warrior, to be used to kill me in the future. I was very clear about that. Su Weisheng, since you are the death warrior who has been hiding for more than 20 years, I, Chen Zhibao, will let you die today. After all, the last man you saw before you died was me. I will take your corpse to Western Shu and be the princess of Shu for 10 years. This group of horses held the silver bottle that was about to overturn the current power structure in the western region. They actually stopped their horses heading west. The place where they stopped was between the Sword Garret and the quicksand. Behind the group of horses was the Iron Gate Pass recorded in the Spring and Autumn Chronicle. The pass was built by the Emperor Qin. The cliff was like an axe, and the stone was like iron. This was a steep canyon that was 20 miles long upstream of the Jiao River. It was an important passage from the western region to the eastern region. Every time the situation in the Central Plains was stabilized, they had to pass through the north and south of Tianshan. The armored soldiers of the Central Plains had to pass through this place. Every time the horse galloped to the west, it symbolized the power of the Central Plains. Every time they retreated to the east, it meant the collapse of the Central Plains. Prince Zhao Kai got into the carriage and sat on the coachman's seat. The talisman general in golden armor stood guard beside him. When he saw a dusty old monk in black coming from the north, he smiled brightly. It was his second master, the sickly tiger Yang Taisui. When the old monk saw that Zhao Kai was safe and sound, he felt relieved. He did not say a word to his disciple, who had the potential to become a Buddha and stop the process of destroying Buddhism. He only put his palms together and bowed to the Bodhisattva. Then he silently turned around and headed east. Less than half a mile away. With a saber and a sword, Su Fengnian urged his horse straight to the Iron Gate Pass. Any prince could rush to the western region to accumulate merits and pave the way for his future ascension to the throne. They could also allow a prince to be the king of Shu who broke the ambush line of Beiliang and Nanzhao. However, a prince could not be the king of Shu after achieving great merits and then sit on the throne by destroying Beiliang. Moreover, this prince was Zhao Kai, the one Li Yishan wanted to kill. In front of him, an old monk rushed toward him. Using the great Buddhist supernatural power, he kept whispering to the hereditary king of Beiliang, Su Fengnian. "Anyone can die. I 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 can die. My 216 retainers can die. Only Zhao Kai can't die. I can escort Zhao Kai back to the capital and go to the Bailiang Palace to ask for forgiveness. If you insist on killing Zhao Kai, who has the emperor's order and is blessed by fate, do you know what will happen to you? The old monk floated over. *CK off. Su Fengnian, who had always been able to remain calm in front of his enemies, suddenly had bloodshot eyes. He angrily said, Yang Taisui, the first person I'll kill today is you. Do you still remember the white clothes case in the capital? I would rather die in the process of practicing my saber than be a useless king of Bailiang in the future. I want to kill you bastards with my own hands.